Murtada and Ben Ramirez and Sally with other people helped come about. And it's a good idea. And like all good ideas, it's been going on now. And this is the 10th year. And I'm very grateful for all the people who have contributed to it over time. In particular, I'm going to thank both Murtada Mohammed, who is the president of the World Affairs Council of Austin and the executive director for the Texas International Business Council, and Ben Ramirez, the vice president and executive director, who is the Center for Global Trade at the World Affairs Council of Austin. They wear many other hats, of course. I know Murtada teaches and has worked in the office of the governor different times. So I'm going to pass this on. My role is really that of trying to bring in funds from the federal government, which we've been successful in doing. We're a national resource center at the Center for European Studies. And before I forget, I'd like to also thank Rachel Steinley for all of her hard work. She is another staff member at the Center for European Studies who handles all of our complicated finances that have to do with the bureaucracies of the United States government. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to leave it to Murtada to talk more about the program and how it's going to fold and introduce the other guests. But thank you very much for coming. And I'm probably going to disappear for some other meetings. Thank you. Murtada?
Thank you. Thank you, Doug, for all what you've done to support the summit and your leadership. Thank you so much for that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Murtada Mohammed, President of the World Affairs Council of Austin and co-chair of the Texas EU Summit. Once again, on behalf of the summit team and our UT Austin partners, I'd like to welcome everyone to a preview of our 10th annual Texas EU Business Summit. In addition to our virtual event today, we plan to reconvene, as my friend Matt mentioned, reconvene in a hybrid format in September, as current conditions permit. Please check the Texas Business Summit website for updates and announcements regarding the reconvene of the event in September. The EU is an important trading partner for the US and Texas in particular for a number of reasons. The EU is a diverse market of 450 million people with a GDP of $15 trillion. Just 1 second here. Have some connection issues. In addition to that, Texas export to the European Union in 2018 exceeded $50 billion. EU investment in Texas tops $275 billion. In addition, small and medium-sized businesses account for almost 40% of all Texas exports. Today's program will highlight some of these opportunities. Our panels today will focus on EU industry sectors and EU market access. Our distinguished panelists will discuss the robust economies of Central Europe, Hungary and Poland, as well as Ireland, Italy, and Luxembourg. In addition to exploring the new digital humanism, they will offer a European perspective on tech companies on both sides of the Atlantic. They will be discussing opportunities and trends within the healthcare and cleantech sectors. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Trigger, who will moderate our first panel. Mr. Trigger is Deputy Director, Business and Community Development, Office of the Governor of Texas. His team executes the governor's initiatives to encourage and facilitate business growth and retention in the state of Texas. Michael's full bio is on the summit program. And now I will turn it over to you, Michael. so that you may introduce your panelists. Michael?
Thank you, Murtada, and thank you, Ben, for an opportunity to present today and kick off the Texas EU Preview Summit with a very, very interesting and distinguished panel of European country representatives that will give you a diverse and a very comprehensive overview of some of the benefits and advantages of expanding your company's investment portfolio and considering investing in their countries. Today, we have representatives from Luxembourg, Ireland, and Italy. Again, a very diverse portfolio of opinions, excuse me, and we hope to highlight the advantages of every country. So joining us today is Pierre Frank, who is a Luxembourg diplomat and has wearing two hats, one as a consul general and also as an executive director of Luxembourg Investment Office in San Francisco. We hope to make this a very special panel for him. It's one of his last ones representing Luxembourg in the United States. His assignment is unfortunately over and he'll be heading home back to Luxembourg in about a month. We also have joining us Mary McAvoy, who's the Vice President of Technology, Consumer and Business Services for IDA Ireland, the agency that the Irish government agency that promotes foreign direct investment. She's been based in Austin for just about 3 years now and works with companies in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas markets. Also joining us today from New York, Valerio Soldani, who's the Deputy Trade Commissioner of the Italian Trade Agency in New York. He oversees foreign direct investment attraction activities and the accelerated programs aimed to Italian startups approaching the US market. So now that we've announced the lineup, I would like to offer an opportunity to our panelists to very briefly speak about their organizations, very specifically about what is it that they do. So Pierre, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Yesterday we had some sound problems. Indeed, I'm Pierre Frank. Indeed, it's one of my last appearances, but I will be replaced in the summer by the next Consul General here in San Francisco. I'm located in San Francisco. Office is located in San Francisco. Has the double function of it's the trade and investment office. So it's FDI attraction to Luxembourg, but also to support Luxembourg companies in the American West, let's put it that way, since we have it's a regional, our office has regional coverage and it covers the whole western part of the US and Canada. But we also have a representation in Austin, Texas. Mr. Pete Slover, our honorary consul, is based in Austin, and of course is also available for follow-up of this panel if necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. Mary?
Hi, Michael. Many thanks to you, the World Affairs Council, UT and partners for inviting us today. Delighted to be back on a panel, even if it is only virtually for now. So as you mentioned, IDA Ireland, we're the agency of the Irish government. We're in existence 70 years now, and our sole focus is to assist multinational companies to set up in Ireland. I'm based here in Austin, along with colleagues. We have a consul general based here in Austin as well. We have a consul office and Enterprise Ireland, who helps Irish companies expand into Texas. So we refer to it as Ireland House on Congress and Fifth. And we're delighted to be here more than 6 years now with an office. Texas is a very important market for us. We have over 40 Texan companies with operations in Ireland now. And there's hundreds of Irish companies with connections and operations in Texas also, so we consider it to be a very key market for us. We do have 8 offices across North America. 1,600 multinationals are in Ireland now, which is very strong given the scale of our country. And the majority of those are from the US, so it's a key market for us, and that's the reason we have 8 offices here. So delighted to be on the panel today.
Thank you, Mary. Larry?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me and inviting the IDA. I work for the Italian Trade Agency, which is the government agency that, under the supervision of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, works for the trade promotion and investment attraction in the United States. We have 5 offices here. We have the New York offices. I'm based in New York. We have an office in Houston, Texas, and another one in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami. Texas is one of our priority markets in the US. We've been investing a lot in promotion and investment attraction. We've been doing a lot of it in digital initiatives in 2020. And we're focusing on aerospace, life sciences, and ITC industries that are thriving right now. So I'm glad to be here. Hi, everybody. And thank you for having us.
Thank you, Valerio. And I would appreciate the overview. And to everyone, this panel is not going to be about presentations. It is meant to be a conversation. So in order to make it a conversation, I'm hoping to ask our panelists some questions that I think might be relevant if I was a business owner. And but we also encourage you to send the questions through the chat. It sounds like Matt, our administrator, has been posting a few messages there with some useful resources, the website and the program. Please use that chat to submit your questions. I'll monitor it throughout our panel and hope to answer as many of your questions as possible. So please, let's make it interactive. So a little warm-up question to everyone on the panel. If for some reason you either don't have enough information or prefer for someone else to answer the question, by all means, please do so. The questions I'm hoping to be are fairly general. So if I was an investor, many investors are looking for ways to limit their risk and lower the cost of entering a new market, especially as a large market as Europe and European Union. How does your organization help with that? And let's go in reverse order. So Valerio, you're up.
Thank you, Michael. Well, you know, we've been working in investment attraction in the last 5 years because we try to concentrate everything that goes beyond the trade promotion that we've been doing for a century now. And we've been working with US investors, just trying to provide a single-stop shop when they are approaching the EU market. What we are experiencing now is that many US investors trying to approach the EU market, just assessing different opportunities in different countries. So what we try to do is to provide relevant information about costs, like labor costs or regulation and compliance costs that are also could be, you know, time consuming when switching to a different market that's overseas. And we're trying to provide that in a more integrated way with a single counterpart in the Italian trade agency. So we have an FDI network worldwide with 2 units here in the United States, one for the West Coast that's handling the Texas market as well, and another one in the East Coast. We're planning to increase our presence here with 3 more units. One should be established in Texas as well. And they are, let's say, the direct one-person counterpart to the US investor. Just to provide, let's say, a practical example, we've been working with some top US companies like Equinix, who established its 4th data center in Milan, in Italy, in 2020, the 3rd quarter. So it was a hard year because of COVID, but we managed to provide relevant data before, they took the final decision to establish their data center in Italy, and then we have them navigating through regulations, costs, and all the assessment and due diligence steps they had to take before taking the decision. So they decided to open up this data center and managed to, let's say, get through all the process thanks to the IDA and our partners in Italy. So I think the added value is having a comprehensive information platform and a single stop shop to just understand what are the opportunities and costs to invest in Italy compared to other European countries.
Very good. Thank you. Mary.
Well, it's no small decision to decide to open an international office. And we work with companies from the earliest stage. So even here in Austin, we work closely with the Capital Factory and every year for South by Southwest for the same reason. So we try and get companies thinking about it at the earliest stage as part of their strategy, and we engage with them through it. There's a number of ways they can enter a market. Usually they want to enter a market like the EU because they have clients there. They want to be able to provide technical or customer support in local time or in the language required, and they can no longer do that from the US in many cases. Sometimes they might partner with a company, an Irish company or another multinational in Ireland that they'll outsource the service to initially. Other times they may acquire a small company and that's their market to entry, or ultimately they might decide to set up themselves. So we engage with them and we're a partner from the very beginning to help them think through the strategies around that, the benefits, the tax implications. And obviously it's more risky for a company to set up themselves and employ people, and they want to make sure that they're making the right decision about the location. Anywhere in the EU will give them access to the market. So it's very strong in that perspective. And often they're drawn to a particular country based on that's where a key client might be. So we try and help them think through like a longer term strategy of 3 to 5 years. What might it look like if they have more clients? Where might they be based? If it's a product they need to distribute, where best to locate. So we broaden out that conversation rather than the very narrow focus they may have initially, and provide all that information that Valeria mentioned. So everything from comparative costs of labor, of office space, but primarily we find that most companies, while sometimes they're attracted somewhere like Ireland because we have that lower tax rate, it's access to talent they really want. So where are they going to get the talent, the multilingual to service all of the EU and all of that? So that's the type of information we provide. And then a key element of what we do is these itineraries where companies can come visit in person for a number of days. They get to visit the locations, talk to tax and legal advisors and recruiters, but primarily they want to talk to other companies who have done it, either in the same sector, their clients, their competitors. And we find in Ireland, companies are very, very open to that, and they can talk to them firsthand. What was their experience? What would they do differently? And that's been a great relationship to give them that confidence to take that first step. And even during the pandemic in the last year, when nobody could visit Ireland, we were able to do all of that virtually. And we've had over 200 investments, even during 2020, despite all the restrictions around travel. But all of those conversations with the various service providers and companies that are already there gave them the confidence to decide to, even during a pandemic, open up an office there so that they're ready to take advantage of the rebound that we're now experiencing.
Very good. Thank you. Here.
Yes, likewise, like my Italian colleague said, we have also developed this one-stop shop approach in Luxembourg. Of course, we as the Trade and Investment Office would be your first interlocutor to help you navigate the different administrations and contacts, potential contacts in Luxembourg. Being, a small country has also some advantages, meaning that access to decision makers is pretty easy and straightforward. There's not many very high hurdles to take to access decision makers. So we have set up in Luxembourg a so-called House of Entrepreneurship, which is one of the agencies, institutions that the one that figures as a one-stop shop is where we will find representatives of the Ministry of the Economy, of the Chamber of Commerce, of the Luxembourg Innovation Agency, all together, and that will help you navigate the first, administrative steps. We have also a simplified procedure for creation of company that would allow you to quickly navigate through that. Of course, you will find, and then we have to enter more into the substance of your business, and that's also something we could do together here or with our partners in Luxembourg. What kinds of incentive schemes would be available to you in terms of SME financing, co-financing of R&D activities, support for young innovative companies, and so forth. So basically, and also all the other aspects from building a workforce, access to talent, housing, well, everything an entrepreneur needs when he wants to quickly hit the ground running and set up his business and develop his activities. We would be, of course, your first partner, but we would very, very quickly put you in relation with people which can help you set up your business quite quickly.
Thank you, Pierre. And you're right, being smaller does have quite a bit of advantage, especially when you do have that very close, intimate one-on-one relationship with between the company and the decision maker. Pierre, if you don't mind, I'll stay with you for a minute. So being a practitioner, an investment promotion practitioner, I hear this quite a bit. Many European countries promote themselves as a gateway to the EU, and with the single market, of course, it's a very valid statement. But for our audience, is it true for your market? And if so, which I assume it is, can you offer some solid, feasible examples of how a potential investor could take advantage of that? And Pierre, I'll start with you, but Mary and Valerio, think about that, and I would like to ask you that question as well.
Sure. Well, I think, if you take a look at the map of Europe, if it's a world map, you will not find Luxembourg because it's just a dot. Luxembourg is the size of Rhode Island. It's 1,000 square miles, has 600,000 inhabitants. So an investor looking at Luxembourg doesn't pick Luxembourg for its domestic market because it's just not there. I mean, it's not big enough to support any how should I say, larger economic or commercial activity. So from the beginning of Luxembourg's development as an industrial and then an economic actor in Europe in the late 19th century, the economic DNA of Luxembourg was to attract FDI, attract foreign investment and export goods and services, just because of the fact that, as I said, we lack the ability to serve with the domestic market. So for us, the creation of the European single market was the single most important thing in terms of allowing us to develop our economic prosperity, which we did. First, it was production and export of steel, because there's iron ore in Luxembourg, and that was the first industrial development in the early 20th century. And then later on, of course, that morphed into a more service-oriented economy with the development of the financial industry in Luxembourg, which now accounts for 30% of the GDP. And now the next transition, of course, is a digital transition, with where you will find really top-notch digital infrastructure when it comes to optical fiber, data centers, rollout of 5G going on quickly now, and also Luxembourg is going to be the hub and the headquarter for the European high-performance computing infrastructure. Being it is distributed, there will be some hardware in Italy and in Spain, but the main hub will be Luxembourg. So basically, for us, it was a necessity. It was to turn weakness into a strength. And what we do well is cross-border operations, be it financial, commercial, whatever. Luxembourg is a truly international country. That's also a very important element. 48% of the resident population don't hold a Luxembourg passport as foreigners. On top of that, you have 200,000 commuters. So basically our workforce is in majority foreign. Now, if you are in, for instance, in a regulated business, I very frequently exchange with companies in the space of the fintech, for instance, where you would need a license, a special financial business license, banking license, or payment license, or so. And then we say the advantage of Europe, the single market, is that you can passport your license in every country. So you're regulated in one country, you can operate in the whole European single market. Whereas in the US, for instance, you need one license per state. So that's pretty more easier, at least from that point of view. But then companies say, well, yes, but we need 27 offices because you speak a different language in every country. Well, this is something, where Luxembourg can help, because all the nationalities, all these languages, all these skills, you will find them in Luxembourg. And that's also why we see many international companies coming to Luxembourg to operate EU-wide, because of this diversity that you will find in Luxembourg.
Very good. Thank you, Pierre. And we do have some great questions coming from the audience. Thank you so very much. I'll make sure to get to them. Please send them to all panelists. However, if there is so everyone could see them. However, if there is a specific panelist that you would like to answer your question, please indicate that in the question, and I'll make sure to answer that. Meanwhile, we'll keep going with the Gateway to Europe question, and Mary, if you wouldn't mind tackling that one.
Sure. Well, actually, yesterday it was 49 years since Ireland voted to join the EU. And I just recently a poll done in Ireland said that 83% of the Irish population still favour being part of the EU. So it's been a huge advantage to us, similar to what Pierre mentioned. Ireland is one of the smaller countries within the EU. So we benefit greatly from being part of that, wider market, both in terms of access to other countries and trade. And so we are very strong proponents of that. Any country within the EU can give you similar rights in terms of access to markets and customers. And obviously with 500 million people across the EU, it's a very attractive market for Texan companies and US companies to enter. Ireland does have some unique benefits, I think, that make it that gateway to Europe. Post-Brexit, we're now the only English-speaking country in the EU, which for American clients does tend to be very popular. We also have the youngest population in the EU, so 50% of our population are under the age of 34. So many other countries are aging, and when it comes to hiring a workforce, strong financial demographics and economic future of a country, that's quite an important aspect. We also have the highest rate of higher education. So where the EU average is 39% of people have a third level qualification at university level, Ireland's is 55%. So we do have the youngest, most educated workforce, which again, back to my comment earlier about access to talent is the primarily reason that they want to come. But that's just the Irish population. As Pierre mentioned, we have a lot of access to, obviously any European, anyone from the EU can come and live and work in Ireland. And we've seen a big influx since Brexit of European people moving from the UK specifically to Ireland because there's such similar markets and many of the same companies are there. And that's been a very strong influx for us also. So I think all of that has helped. Over 17% of our employees in Ireland now are non-Irish, so from all over the EU, and providing all that multilingual technical support and customer service that the companies are looking for. The majority of the US companies in Ireland and all the major tech companies you can think of, Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they all have their international headquarters in Ireland. Many would have additional offices across Europe also. So that's a very common structure that they put in place to have their first office in Ireland and then additional offices if they require it in various countries. So that's quite common. And we also have a common law system in terms of our legal system, which is similar to the US system. So that also gives companies a lot of comfort around employment law. It's quite different, and they are entering a new continent in terms of laws and restrictions, and that often worries companies entering the market. So Ireland having that more flexible common law approach is much more attractive to companies too. So I think there are some of the aspects why Ireland is viewed as more attractive, but to say many of the companies would also have offices across the EU. And in our case, it's not just the EU market. Most countries have their EMEA headquarters in Ireland. So they're servicing Asia, Africa, also from Ireland. And the time zone is perfect for that, for US companies as well. It's another reason they choose to go overseas, not just for the EU market, for beyond as well.
Sure, makes sense. Thank you. Valeria, we'll give you a chance to answer that one before we go to some of the audience questions.
Thank you, Michael. Well, Italy is the third economy of the EU, and it's the ninth economy of the world in terms of GDP, and we are the fifth European partner to the United States. So working with more than 1,000 Italian companies that are already established in the United States, hiring people and making business here, there's a long-lasting relationship, which is something that's very good when you're working in, let's say, a very thriving environment of industrial clusters. When I speak to our US investors, they are only always focused on, let's say, the very first category of the US investment to Italy. That is, 36% of manufacturing investment. When everybody thinks about Italy, it's the average person would think about fashion, furniture, food, which are very relevant part of our tradition, our nation brand. But when it comes to actual business, the very first voice of exports to the US is industrial technology. And when it comes to US investments to Italy, it's all about manufacturing, aerospace, innovation. And this is the lion's share of the US investment. And I think Mary mentioned a very important aspect when it comes to dealing with the foreign investors approaching the EU, which is the talent pool. And with the fourth university and academic community in EU, I think there's a huge pool to build your workforce and just merge your know-how with the local talent. We've seen a lot with the 2020 investments that were more on the digital, biotech, and pharmaceutical industries. There's been a lot of resilience of the industrial clusters in Italy. We have a widespread all across the northern and southern part of Italy, a widespread presence of industrial clusters made out of small and medium enterprises that work along with strong multinationals, and they provide the necessary flexibility and talent when dealing with the needs of a modern industry. Just to think about one figure that I'm always very well aware of is that we have the first patent rate in the EU, and we've seen days, for example, in the life sciences industry, where we have doubled the rate of experts in the last decade, and now we are traveling fast in having a triple digit compared to 10 years ago. And when it comes to a post-COVID era, it's really relevant in providing what US companies approaching Italy and the EU need in terms of talent, in terms of talent cost, which is interesting. Of course, there are several, let's say, incentives we provide to investors, like tax credit or development contract or specific tools or toolkits, let's say, like the Smart and Start package we offer to innovation companies or tech companies or startups as well that are looking to, let's say, maybe after a very big investment funding round in the US, maybe they're looking to expand their business in the European country. And we're able to provide incentives and let's say tax credit or grants or soft loans, but it's not all about that. I think that the talent pool and the strong relationship in terms of business is something that works. If you think about our GDP, 1/3 of that is export. So we were born as an international oriented economy, and it's growing, and it's, let's say, one of the fastest growing components of our GDP. And that makes the difference when you're handling maybe your renovated supply chain after COVID, or maybe you're rethinking the way you restructure your relationship with suppliers, with the other markets in EU. And I think when it comes to Italy, it's a good chance and a good opportunity to assess our environment and as a whole, not only about tax incentives and other, let's say, fast tracks that we could offer or provide to international investors.
Thank you, Valerio. And whether by design or not, you provided a perfect segue into some of our Q&A question. I hear a recurring theme of access to talent and workforce. And the question comes from Donovan Blaylock, saying, with the rise of work from anywhere, WFA, believe it or not, this is the first time I'm hearing that term, and I'll now remember it. So with the rise of work from anywhere over the past few years, I'm sure especially in the past year, how have each of you seen changes in the US, Texas, or based companies using personnel and resources based in your countries? Any trends we should be aware of? Pierre, if you'd like to take that on, any trends of US or Texas company-based companies using personnel and resources based in your countries in the work from anywhere era?
Speaking of the US, of course, I've been like most of us, been stuck in the Bay Area. So I didn't have the opportunity in the last year to travel much and see other places than here. What I can say is that, of course, as Mary said, we have also some larger US corporations that have picked Luxembourg as their European headquarters, Amazon being one of those. Employs 3,000 people in Luxembourg, and it's not, warehousing jobs, but it's more white collar IT jobs and stuff like that. And also other, like PayPal is another one, and many companies, international companies in e-commerce have chosen Luxembourg as their payment hub because, as I said before, this gateway function, the expertise that we have in cross-border commerce. So, but travel has been restricted, as everybody knows. Our office here has, in the past, always been very active as a consulate to help, people navigate between Amazon would be then Seattle and Luxembourg for meetings, for things like that. And so we've seen that has been completely stopped. So the companies have, of course, and these tech companies anyways have adopted a different work model and working remote or from home. But for Luxembourg specifically now, which would not be US centric, but for Luxembourg specifically, we were confronted with the very difficult situation that some of our, in the beginning of the COVID crisis, some of our neighboring countries closed the borders and wouldn't allow people to cross the border for health security reasons, and being dependent on foreign workforce, on the commuters coming from France, from Germany, from Belgium, especially in the health sector, the nurses and so forth. We had to adopt very quickly a system where, for instance, in Luxembourg, the government had requisitioned hotels to allow the nurses to stay in the country and not having to commute. And also later on, for other jobs, what Luxembourg had to do is that it had to negotiate with neighboring countries agreements on how many days people could work from home, because it's a taxation issue, because you pay your taxes basically where you work. And when you're working from France, basically the French government wants to collect taxes from people working in Luxembourg, but staying in France. So we had to negotiate separate agreements allowing the quota of days that people would work from home in their respective countries to increase. So that's something, a trend that we've seen now. How sustainable that is going to be, I think some of it will stick as generally these home office. Some of it will stick even after we will come back, hopefully, to a more normal way of living.
Thank you. Mary, would you like to take that one on?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, March 13th, I think, was a date in everyone's diary last year when suddenly the world went remote, certainly in Europe. And we were very lucky in the sense that the government a number of years previous had started a plan to roll out high-level broadband to literally every home in the whole island of Ireland. So when everyone suddenly had to return back home, we discovered that it actually held up very, very well, and that everybody was able to work remotely. Sorry, 1 second. From talking to our clients, we stayed very engaged with them, and we see them now talking about just having that hybrid model of not fully remote, but not using their office fully, and allowing people to work in attractive remote locations, rural locations in Ireland, and coming to the office 2-3 days a week. To Pierre's point, the tax issue did become a problem because a lot of people from other European countries returned to those countries during the pandemic, and then that became a bit of an issue for companies based in Ireland, and they had to get their workers to return from tax reasons. But they've done that since, and it's resumed. And I think for the most part, it's held up pretty well. I think just the pandemic has accelerated what was going to happen over the next decade, which is more of a remote working environment. We've provided a lot of grants and assistance to companies to help them with that digitization process and to accelerate that, providing consultants and funding for them to go online. And we've seen that even the retail sector having to go develop e-commerce solutions to be able to maintain those connections with our customers. So I think it's here to stay. And I think for the most part, it's positive. It will change some of the plans for US companies who may have felt they had to be in certain countries. They may now choose to do that more remotely. So that's still evolving, and we're monitoring that closely. We'll just have to see how that evolves over time.
Thank you, Mary. Valerio, any trends that you see in US companies using personnel and resources based in Italy?
We've seen, a trend like for a lot of digital company that was switching to several verticals that are now very interesting. Just to give you an example, we are the 4th digital market in the European Union, and we're witnessing a double-digit growth in cloud services or IoT services and cybersecurity as well. So there's, let's say, general growth in this kind of market volume, but there are some verticals that are growing more than others, and they are, seeing a lot of international investors that are looking to Italy just to establish another investment opportunity. And I think another trend that we are witnessing is, being based in New York, we've seen a lot of US companies trying to rethink the way they handle their real estate assets. So we are able to provide a comprehensive platform to handle that in Italy with a strong selection and wide selection of real estate assets in Italy. So many companies are approaching us just to understand how in handling a brownfield investment or getting through a greenfield investment approach in Italy, how to handle the real estate part, maybe because they are investing in the retail market now, which is a good moment before the economy bounces back, like we've seen already in the United States market. And this is a very good question they start from. And we have not only a website that's called investinitalyrealestate.com, but a comprehensive platform to help them rethink corporate spaces in Italy, not only in terms of talent, but in terms of real estate assets and compliance and costs. And I think that the post-COVID era will be a hybrid era because as you may see, it's a lot of opportunities in working remotely and working from everywhere, but we will be seeing a mixed up approach and having people in person in the corporate spaces and other people working from anywhere. And I think it's a good way here to just connect different industrial clusters. One more thing, maybe you already know that from the newspapers, but Italy will be one of the top countries as a destination of the EU recovery and resilience plan. So there will be billions of euros invested, and our government just presented by the end of April a general plan with a very strong investment in terms of cloud and infrastructure, but as well in collaborative projects among universities, tech centers, and competence centers. So if you think about, for example, the space economy, which is a very hot industry for Texas, we have one of the biggest runway and spaceports in Europe, in Grottaglie, and we are providing a comprehensive platform and infrastructures in terms of hard infrastructures and soft infrastructures to companies that are willing to invest there. And with a good cluster of small and medium enterprises and multinational company, I think that this new hybrid approach will be a good opportunity to be at the center of the business by merging talent from everywhere and just managing all the assets of the company in a smarter way, like we're already seeing in several, let's say, hotspots of the US tech industry. We've seen many tech companies moving from Silicon Valley to Texas to other territories, and that shows a trend that, you know, it's not only in the US, it's global, it's everywhere, and it's in Italy too.
Sure. Thank you, Valerio. And that just shows that quite a bit of work that was done by the private sector and the governments in the run-up to the pandemic is now paying off, and all of those seeds are beginning to sprout. So we are about 10 minutes from wrapping up, so we have time for a couple more questions. This one comes from Regina McAvane, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. But this one is a good one. Regina is a business owner, and so far, she says, we are gearing towards some of the established companies looking to have presence in the EU. She wants to switch the conversation a little bit. So she's a small company that's looking to source materials and possibly some manufacturing from Europe. Are there contacts for investing options there? And the second part of the question, she's thinking about possibly sourcing from multiple places, and she even gives examples like she has a cosmetics firm, so lanolin and seaweed from Ireland, essential oils and herbal formulas from Italy, and so forth. So in her research, the administrative cost and delivery seem different from country to country. The question, the second part of the question is, are there ways to simplify this? So two-parter. One is, are there investment options where a US-based company is just looking to perhaps source and maybe do some manufacturing in the EU? And the second one, is there a way to simplify administrative and delivery costs because they're so different from country to country? I don't know if Mary wants to take that on, or Valerie, if you're ready, we can start with you.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, a lot of companies starting out are not prepared themselves to make an investment as yet, which is often very advisable depending on their market and the scale of the company. So many times we would source other options for them where they can partner with a company in Ireland that can do the manufacturing or the services for them in the meantime. So Enterprise Ireland, our other agency based here in Austin, is the source for all Irish companies. So whenever you want to find out an Irish company, list of Irish companies that may do a particular aspect of the cosmetics industry, she mentioned, they can provide all of those contacts for them and help with coordinating all of that information. So it is quite common for companies to start out in that way, and then if they're successful and grow to a certain size themselves, they may then choose to do so directly, or may never do so directly and outsource permanently. So outsourcing is very common. Partnering or acquiring companies in other markets is also very common as a partnership mode as well. Upland Software here in Austin has acquired a number of Irish companies, and that's their way to enter the market. So we have a variety of options in that respect. In terms of sourcing materials, I mean, it may be different from each country. I'm not sure what exact administrative costs and delivery, obviously coming from different countries, there may be differences, but given the EU laws are common in terms of standards and what's required across every manufacturer across the EU, I would have thought it would be pretty standard in terms of the quality of the products that you source. But yes, it probably would require contacting each country separately, but each country would have what I described in terms of being able to provide information and source and access and making those connections. And that's what we do in economic development, is try and encourage as much trade as possible, provide those connections between companies that would like to trade together. So I would have thought that would be pretty easy to access, and any of the panelists here would be able to provide similar information for their countries, I'm sure.
Very good. Thank you. Pierre?
Well, similarly, yes. Coming back to what I said in the beginning about the gateway question, Luxembourg being a small country, small market, you can say that 80% of what Luxembourgers consume is imported, and 80% of what they produce is exported in goods and services. So moving goods is something very common in Luxembourg, and likewise, like Mary said, of course we would be able also through the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, or such actors, to bring a potential investor or people from the US together in this community of like-minded companies to help each other out with that. One of the main, well, that's maybe it's not so important now for this specific business, but generally one of the main, how should I say, sectors that Luxembourg is developing in its diversification strategy is the logistics sector. So you will see that Luxembourg has an excellent logistics hub, combining air, train, rail, and water, so it's really should I say a hub and also a gateway in that respect for goods in Western Europe, in this part of Europe. So the company Regina will most definitely find partners or companies, individuals to partner up with and to help her out with that. And speaking English, of course.
Very important. Valerio.
Well, I like this question particularly because, we have a very strong beauty industry in Italy. We have a $14 billion roughly last year's market volume, and 45% of that is exported. It's not for the domestic market in Italy. And I would say it's one of the strongest vertical in the e-commerce sales that are not only cross-border, which means in the, let's say, European market, but as well overseas. So I think there's a good selection of partners in Italy. What we are witnessing, and I could say that because in the New York office we have a dedicated team to the beauty products and fashion products that work closely with let's say a total let's say, healthy approach, because they're very close with the food specialists in our office. So they could provide a wide range of partners that could be very helpful, both for the private label approach that it's very now high trend. It's a high trend in Italy, and for several verticals in the beauty industry that are now thriving. I just think about one, which is the thermal cosmetics from natural springs and natural sources that are very common in Italy. And many of them are now sold in the, let's say, premium marketing channels like spas or healthcare bundled solutions that are pretty good in the US market as well. And I think there's plenty of providers that could be helpful on that. As I said, when I was introducing the Italian trade agency, it would be working, let's say, forever with the export promotion, which is our, let's say, core business, not only the investment attraction. So we have a wide portfolio of Italian companies that are able to provide solutions and prices for both a private label approach and other manufacturing solutions. Many of them are small and medium enterprises, or you're not speaking with somebody in a big corporate who cannot follow up or take decisions. You're speaking with a decision taker or maybe the CEO of the company. So it could be very helpful when it comes to a small company trying to invest in a such delicate and thriving sector. So this is my thinking. When it comes, one last second, to the administrative part, I see there are a lot of options that are chosen by this kind of companies in Italy now to sell digital cosmetics products. Just to give an example, we have an agreement with one top e-commerce player in China, which is one of the most difficult markets for cosmetics, and they are providing, let's say, single-stop approach to providing logistics and administrative bundles. So a lot of companies are already doing that. 50% of their revenue comes from exports, so there's a thriving environment that could help with that. Just shoot us a message at newyork@ice.it and we're there. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria. And I'd like to thank you and Mary and Pierre for a wonderful panel. I think I've learned quite a bit, and I hope our audience have learned and was able to derive quite a bit of value in our conversation. I am sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions from our audience, but I hope the conversation is just starting. And if you would like to follow up, please contact the organizers, Ben Mortada, University of Texas, and they'll provide all of our contact information. With that said, I'd like to hand off our continuation of our Texas EU Summit to the second panel on the EU market access, moderated by the University of Houston professor, Candace Tenbrake. Thank you so much.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this morning. This morning, our panel is going to discuss on-ramping and EU market access from the perspective of two different countries, Hungary and Poland. I'll give a brief bio of our panelists, and then I just want to let you know this session will also have 60 minutes, and after 50 minutes, we will open it up for Q&A, so feel free to ask questions and then post them in the Q&A section on Zoom. So let me go ahead and get started. First of all, we have Gabor Markochania. He is a graduate from a business school with a degree in economics and international trade. Mr. Markochania began his career at a privately owned Hungarian foreign trade company. After joining the Hungarian Export Promotion Agency in 2011, he was responsible for promoting technology exports of SMEs, while also serving as the private sector liaison officer of the World Bank and the UN in Hungary. Gabor started his foreign service career in Mexico City as trade attaché and was subsequently promoted to the head of the Latin American Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade on Hungary. In 2018, he was appointed to lead the new diplomatic representation of Hungary in Houston, Texas, to create long-lasting ties between the Texan and the Hungarian economy with focus on innovative stakeholders. Gabor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Next up, we have Zuzanna Kodrinsky. She is the head of the Polish Investment and Trade Agency office in Houston, Texas, which is part of a network of 6 US-based offices. Her office covers 7 states. The agency's mission is to help Polish entrepreneurs expand their footprint into the US market and to help encourage the flow of FDI in Poland. Prior to joining the agency, she ran the innovation program for the American Chamber of Commerce in Poland, starting a foundation to teach girls to code, was the assistant director of NYU's Center of the Cold War in the United States, and ran the editorial office of Slate magazine. Zuzanna completed her undergraduate and graduate studies at NYU. And if anyone knows Zuzanna, she's a powerhouse. Welcome, Zuzanna. And Marcin, I don't have your bio. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Let me make it short and sweet. On the map of Poland, there is a gate that we call it the world's gate to Europe, which is called the Tri-City in Pomerania. And I'm responsible mostly for the business services end of the foreign direct investment on behalf of Invest in Pomerania. However, as we're currently the most dynamically developing region of Poland, I would say that Zuza, I would be Zuza's best friend in northern Poland right now, hopefully, and quite frequent visitor in mostly Houston, Texas, but also have friends in Austin. And hey, Ben, hopefully you can hear me now. Guys, happy to be here. Marcin Grzegorek, graduating from the University of Gdańsk, Candace. And I majored in philosophy and social studies, but most of my professional life, I worked in sales. And for the last 7 years, I helped Invest in Pomerania.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marcin. I noticed my voice is a little froggy this morning. Sorry about that. It is what it is, I guess. So if you're wondering how I got invited on this panel, I'm actually a Fulbright US scholar, and I did my research in Poland. So Marcin and I actually go back a bit. And of course, I met Zuzanna through my Fulbright opportunity. I just throw that in there as a plug, and also to offer if anyone has any questions about Fulbright off this panel or wants to talk about innovation in Poland, I'm always happy to talk about that as well. Okay, so I will ask questions now to all of the panelists, and they'll have approximately 2 to 3 minutes to respond to each, and we'll try to keep each in total to about 5 or 6 minutes. If you could all do that, that would be awesome. Okay, so to kick this off, can you please tell us in 1 or 2 minutes what your organization offers firms that want to do business in your specific country that you represent? And specifically, could you also please touch on innovation capabilities that you offer? Marcin, go ahead since you're live.
So basically, we are the overall, we are called the interface of the region towards the foreign direct investment. However, we would like to think of ourselves as glue rather than an interface. So what we do is not only provide access for the foreign direct investing companies to the region of Pomerania, but we would be your local pathfinder. What we do is we do not only guide you into the region, but help you start the best proper way. We facilitate all the proper matchmaking. We would guide you to your partners, some of your clients, definitely your providers and vendors. And what's important here is we have a strong, a strong tissue, I would say, even than a society of incubators and business accelerators that are mostly pointed towards technology, partly biotech, like chemistry. So there's quite substantial knowledge sharing going on. Well, with our support, you definitely get the access right away. And what's important here is our organization is EU funded. Therefore, everything we do for the investor is free of charge. That also, just pointed out. So basically, you have a dedicated person in our team taking care of your query or your project, and then it's a one-stop shop from then on, with all our 21 institutions that are associated under the one common denominator that is Invest in Pomerania.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Sticking with Poland, Zuzana.
Thanks for that warm intro, Candace, and thanks for Ben and Mortada for having us and allowing us to talk about what we do and how we encourage EU market access. My name is Zuzana Kobrzinski. As Candace mentioned, I head up the Polish Investment and Trade Agency based in Houston, along with my colleague Paulina Mieczkowska-Likon. We have two main goals for our mission. One is to help Polish exporters launch in the United States and grow, and the other is to encourage FDI. We partner with organizations like Martin's organizations all across Poland in terms of encouraging FDI. We have a Center for Strategic Investment based in Warsaw that works with American companies that are looking to invest in Poland. In terms of innovation and what's happening in Poland, Poland is becoming Europe's tech hub. We have over 400,000 developers based in Poland. HackerRanks ranks our developers as the top 3 in the world. We have over 74,000 programming graduates in Poland. We have over 7 programming tech hubs in Poland. Huge investments from Google, Microsoft that are worth over $2 billion to encourage innovation in Poland and help American companies find their partners in the country.
Wonderful, thank you, Zuzana. Gabor, Hungary, please.
Thank you, Candace. And then first of all, a special thanks for the World Affairs Council of Austin for organizing this and inviting us. As Candace mentioned, I lead the Vice Consulate of Hungary in Houston, which is new diplomatic representation. I'm career diplomat. Vice Consulate may be misleading. This office is mainly focused on business, trade, and investment, with a special mission of forming long-term relationships, as we have a really great basis with Texas. FDI-wise, about 1/5 of total US investments originated from Texas, and US is our biggest investor outside of the EU. And also we do more trade with Texas than we do with Canada. So that's a partnership which has been growing in the last 2 decades. And the mission of this diplomatic representation is to, as I said, build a long-term cooperation based on innovation, especially to form cooperation with universities, innovation centers, participate in accelerator programs, basically with the aim to meet the small and medium-sized enterprises of Hungary with the small and medium-sized enterprises of Texas, of course, not excluding the cooperation with the greater companies as well. But also, we are really focused on innovation, specializing on ICT. The innovation ecosystem in this sector in Hungary is growing, and we have about 700 Hungarian startups in this sector, and we are really keen on connecting those with the local Texan stakeholders.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so next up, there are positives in expanding abroad, such as cost savings, moving closer to one's customers, or expanding into new markets, so tapping new market opportunity. And certainly there are challenges, such as language barriers, cultural differences, and government rules and regulations. From your perspective, what are the biggest benefits for Texas firms entering into your specific areas? And again, and also please touch on the challenges. So what are the specific benefits and challenges? And this time I will go ahead and start with Gabor.
Thank you. So Hungary is practically located geographically in the center of Europe, with a gateway to the west and east. We define ourselves as Central European, and basically we've been in Europe in the last 1100 years, and we plan to stay so. Hungary has an extent cooperation, not just regionally but locally. We are a really open economy. We are members of the European Union. We are members of the United Nations, OECD, NATO, IMF, etc. We have really nice climate compared to the Texans, and our natural disaster risk is really low, so that could be an asset. And also Budapest is a really great hub for international stakeholders, and we have about 5 growing regional hubs that are open for cooperation. So we have a New Jersey-sized country with a population of less than 10 million people, but we are really focused on being open and cooperate within business. We also have our own currency, which also help, and the unique Hungarian language, which used to create a lot of barriers, but today, especially younger generation, talented generation in modern technologies are pretty much keen on learning any sort of languages. English is the most widely spoken language in Hungary, with German, and I believe that the knowledge of Hungarian and the difficulty of the language allows us to learn easily and adapt. For example, National Instruments, a Texan company, which has a great operation in Hungary, was looking to enter into Finland, but at the end of the day, a few Hungarians volunteered to learn Finnish, so their Finnish operation is now running out from their site in Debrecen. But again, the environment is really pro-business and pro FDI and trade. Our corporate tax is the lowest in the Europe with 9%. We are easing the tax burden on labor first taxes, and we are really focusing our policies and incentives on R&D and innovation, just to make that change in our economy to increase productivity, create higher value added manufacturing. Also, of course, there are quite a few challenges, but I believe with the right Hungarian stakeholders, these are easier to overcome. And Hungary in the last 30 years adapted pretty much to Western business standards, especially in the last 2 decades. Within the EU, there is not much difference in doing business in, let's say, Spain, France, or Hungary. Each stakeholder has to offer its own spice, I would say, a special touch on style. But it's just to wrap it up, it's about the same to enter into approach.
Thank you, Marcin.
Well, as Gabor mentioned, it's a totally different Central Europe than it always used to be, because the young guys want to learn, they want to expand their horizons, they want to go out and they want to experience the world, but also live their dream. So basically, English is not a foreign language anymore. So we could shake hands with Hungary as our languages are at the top of the ladder of the most difficult languages to learn. But again, the major cities are so popular among tourists that everywhere there's at least an English speaking staff available, or the whole interface. So I started from the potential obstacles, but it's always, I would say, the mindset of everybody involved. Do we want to get along, or do we want to just do our chores and go home? Because one thing I can vouch for is, from my experience, and bear in mind that the business services sector that I'm proudly representing most of my time in Invest in Pomerania. Every third person employed in Pomeranian BSS is hired by an American originating company. So that says it all when it comes to the overall footprint, but also this says a lot about us being very aware of our major advantages. We're working hard to get companies from Texas around. This is why for 4 years in a row, fortunately 2020 was a surprise, but we're trying to catch up this year and the next. But each of the previous years we were visiting Texas, and our plan is to build at least a few bridges to get the bilateral exchange going on, because if Poland has one thing the Texas companies might enjoy is the scale. We can provide the scale that especially in high tech reality is it's much sought for, because if you look at the Polish landscape, multiple operations of at least engineers or IT specialists are nothing out of the box when it comes to Poland. In Tri-City, for example, runs the biggest Intel engineering operations outside of the United States of America. And my favorite example always is Alexa, a very dear friend to many American households, which originated and was originally designed by the students of Gdańsk universities. And her actually, nice trivia, that Alexa is a stage name. And the real name is Ivona, and Ivona was created as a aid for the hard of seeing. So I would say problem-solving attitude, the open-mindedness again, and the scale would prove beneficial for one, and we would definitely go for getting the right people on the right places in time in Pomerania. Basically, we were always, the Gdańsk especially, was always understood as the birthplace of solidarity. This is why we have the primary agreement with Mr. President Wałęsa that he will be representing the Polish area in the Offshore Technology Conference, hopefully 2022. We are strongly building our business approach on the values of solidarity, of the openness, of the problem-solving ground. So obviously, Zuzanna, I don't want to step on your major points about the whole of Poland, but there is an old saying in Poland that everything good, every wind of good change in Poland always starts in the north, and this is where we're based. So I could go for hours about our maritime connections, obviously about multiple common areas, but it's all there to experience. Basically, it's starting from the catchphrase that we started presenting in OTC 3 years ago, and it went invest in Poland and start with Pomerania, your preferable gateway. Again, thank you, Candace. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Marcin. Zuzanna, anything left for Poland?
I always want to steal Marcin's line about Alexa because I think that's such a crowd pleaser. And he always beats me to it. But that's his line. So it's copyrighted by Marcin and Invest in Pomerania. There's a reason that Poland is the third biggest recipient of FDI. in the world behind the United States and China. You know, obviously I touched on that in my intro, right? In terms of human capital, you have a highly educated workforce. You have a lot of investment structure, investment opportunity in Poland in terms of tax breaks by the government. It's centrally located in Europe, so you have the infrastructure, you have access to the ocean. There are 4 major airports that service Europe and all over the world, right? In terms of English language proficiency, I believe Poland is ranked number 11, which is a great opportunity for American companies to be comfortable with that language difference. Even though there is a language difference, I mean, you know, when you have an educated workforce that knows your language, it's an easy pick, right? Right now, over 1,500 Polish companies that have US capital investment. That's a huge number, and we're hoping to increase that more. In terms of challenges, I mean, because it's a common culture, I was reading this Harvard business study that looked at a multinational corporation. They had managers from all over the world. And one of the things that helped communication and build trust between Europeans and North Americans was openness. And you see that in Poland. In the transformation in the past 30 years, there's been an incredible openness to cooperation and working with countries and people from around the world. So, you know, in terms of challenges, it's hard for me to really come up with one, because when you land in Warsaw, you land in Gdańsk, or you land in Krakow, I mean, besides the architecture, you know, you don't feel like you're in a foreign place, right? So you got me on challenges, but maybe I'll come up with something later during the panel.
All right, thank you, Susanna. Our next question. How open is your economy, and what tactics do firms take to enhance bilateral business success? Is there any sort of fear of instability in politics east of the EU? Susanna, I'm going to start with you this time, if you don't mind.
So there's a really good case study about this. You know, there have been troubles in Belarus in the past year. And one of the things my agency did along with the government is opening up a program for entrepreneurs from Belarus called Business Harbor in Poland. To help create stability for them, to give them a place, again, a safe harbor for their investments. And because of that program, traditionally the United States has been the biggest FDI investor in Poland. But because of that program, Belarus was the biggest investor last year. In terms of stability, Poland is a stable economy. It did not suffer during the 2008 recession. It's had GDP growth consecutively for the past 30 years. Even COVID has not impacted the economy that much. There was a 2.8% shrinkage of the GDP last year, and this year they're predicting almost a 4% growth. So there's definitely a stability in Poland that I think companies can rely on. Being a part of NATO, being a part of the EU, the OECD, the World Bank, obviously those are credentials that, again, translate into stability. So.
Great, thank you. Marcin.
You know, but I will start from a different angle. For almost 10 years now, we have a special service offered to our investors, which is called the investor spokesperson. In very sort of short words, that will be the person to help you with all the questions or queries or challenges that are involving your Pomeranian business or Pomeranian-based business and are out of your core business. And we had multiple cases over the years to either help with the smaller, bigger challenges in the area. But from time to time, we get a very general question that would sometimes be based on political events or social events. And I had the privilege of being or representing the investor spokesperson service for 6 years. We have a dedicated project manager for that now, and she's doing great for the last 7-8 months because we're obviously having more and more different areas that this position can expand. But I would say in general terms that Pomerania as such, as I said with the previous question, we are the so-called symbol of the open-mindedness, and we're far more than just declaring going this one step forward. I mean, every time we interface with an investor or a potential investor, we will always go by our creed, by our mission statement, which is we care more, and we encourage everybody to hold us accountable to that, because it's easier said than done, obviously. But there are our terms and conditions that we operate in, and the tools that we set to help bring investors on board and then help them prosper would always keep all the discussions to the point of how good is Pomerania in the wider landscape of Poland a good match for your business. And the sole fact that when you enter the region, you would have all the institutions that are responsible for the economical growth of that region at your side, because in very plain words, this is who we are. We represent all the institutions of the region. You have access to both the marshal, you would have the mayors of the cities present whenever you need them to be. I would say that's a pretty strong corner that you would have in any given situation. And if you add that to the overall social willingness to expand, to experience, and to prosper, to develop, I would say it's pretty stable. There are moments, obviously, from time to time where you just experience the catching up process, I would say, because if you look at Polish economy or Pomeranian economy, this is still only around 30 years of free market, of basically being democratic. So there are elements that will pop out every now and then that you just need to take care of. There's sort of no cheating evolution in general terms. So as much as we'd like to, as quick as the progress goes, as the overall success goes, there would be some elements prone for maintenance, and this is what we do. So basically, if you look around the world, I would say there are few places more stable in business terms than Central Europe. And if you add to that, if you want to have that element there, that arbitrage between the openness for growth and the machine for growth and stability, I would say definitely this is where you want to be looking for your next site.
Thank you so much. That is a perfect segue for you, Gabor.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And I also want to add something to Susanna's thought and make a strong point that Central Europe is not Eastern Europe. It's a different logic, how we see geography and history at the same time. But being members of international organizations, EU, NATO, etc., just gives us guarantees that you're not really dealing with something different from Germany or Sweden or Portugal, because it is just a different game. And also Hungary and Poland has some similarities and some differences as well. We don't have that internal market size as Poland have, and so our situation is a bit of Luxembourg was in the previous panel, that we are really dependent on international cooperation, business cooperation, exports, imports, FDI, and that showed in 2008 when we were so vulnerable that we went bankrupt before Greece in the crisis. But some economic reforms have been implemented. The whole conceptual change was in industry, manufacturing, also taxation, and the whole concept towards innovation R&D was changed, and that made us from an economy which was lagging behind to the engine powerhouse, the powerhouse of growth of the EU. And pre-COVID times, Hungary had the highest GDP growth within the EU, but the whole region, Central Europe, is really, really strong and just became so competitive, especially I believe majority of the audience knows the Visegrad 4 grouping, which is Slovakia, Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary. We have about 60 million of population. We do more business and trade with Germany than France does. So we are sort of throughout our transition time, we became from emerging into somewhat which is entering into a state which would have been without the 40 years occupation from the Soviet Union. So it's a really new scenario today in Central Europe than it was 30, but even 20 years ago. Hungary, with its around the 90th in the world regarding of its population, but we are the 33rd greatest exporter, at the 20th greatest exporter in automotive goods, 19th in pharmaceutical goods, and 15th globally in crop exports. Our exports to GDP ratio is about 100%, and we have been breaking records of exports each year in the last 5-6 years, and even the COVID didn't really hit us as hard as everyone was expecting, and we are supposed to have a really great recovery today or this year. So we are really positive on how things will go. And you know, tactics and bilateral business. I would come back to the previous question. You know, like one of our main disadvantages, I believe that's our advantage, because we are in a transition. We are growing constantly, and that gives us a really good tool, which is adapting to the circumstances. So we are able to adapt to whatever needs you have for your business, to make your partnership successful. We are truly interested in landing your operation in Hungary or in Central Europe in a sustainable way that is beneficial for your company and for our local stakeholders as well.
Thank you so much, Gabor. Marcin, you're up next for this question, and we're actually going to run out of time. I know we said I'll talk for 2 hours on Poland and Hungary, but anyway, let's keep the answers to this question, if we could, to about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes maximum each. That would be awesome. Okay, so we know that trust takes time to build, and the components of trust are many, and part of it is getting used to cultural differences and understanding others, right? And building mutual understanding. So in terms of building trust, which is frequently not in the business decision, right? It's not quantitative. We're such a quantitative driven world now. How do you help firms that want to come to your country build trust? And in particular, how does that work with your clients or prospective relationships in the Texas area? Because as we all know, Texas is very different than the West Coast and extremely different from the East Coast as well. Marcin, please.
You had to torture me with my favorite area and give me 90 seconds. Thank you, Candace. I would say that we made the decision of going forward and visiting Texas first, and to let us be seen, experienced, and just show our case to the Texas business and say, guys, this is what we have. This is what we're good with. This is where we're still improving. This is our business case, and this is our overall proposition. A lot of that actually, it's probably this is going to sound a bit awkward, but we're experts in including to the business decision process things that are impossible to squeeze into an Excel sheet, because we are Poland's used to be the Poland's summer capital. We used to be, the coast, and we used to be the harbor city, and obviously the gateway, and so on and so forth. But we managed to, in the long run, to turn that into our biggest advantage, because our atmosphere, our overall approach facilitated the biggest influx of people as the favorite place to both live in and do business in. So I would say, it's all in the "we care more" catchphrase, which, sorry, it's not a catchphrase. It's actually our creed. It's how we live. And step by step, with all the new investors that trust us, I would always go for one major fact: when they reinvest. Because every time you get a new investor, it's selling a promise, right? But every time they reinvest and go deeper, and every few years they say, okay, we want to hire 200 more people, or we want to invest 200 million more, that always a proof of concept and proof that we make good on the promise. And this is where the trust is built. Thank you. I respect.
As a strategy professor, I love that answer, because you're right. Every time you invest another dollar, it is a choice. Thank you, Marcin. Zuzana, staying with Poland, and then Gabor.
Well, in terms of trust, I think our offices are a vehicle for building trust with businesses. We're on the ground. We get embedded in the community. Businesses meet with us. Businesses see us at events. And again, coupled with Poland's stability, I think that's absolutely a vehicle. Having trade missions is a way of building trust. Exchanges between Texas and Poland. These are all methods that you build up a reputation, a brand, and a presence in a community, and that extends to trust. I think having that presence is very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe from a 10,000 feet perspective, we are hungry, but I believe that in our region we are interested, truly interested in lending your success. May that be a trade when you want to buy something, maybe you want to utilize one of our innovative ideas, or you want to grow your business locally. We are just truly interested in your success, because that's our success. These countries are coming from a long way as emerging stakeholders. We already are at a really great stage, but we just have to finish our job, and we see Texas as a true and natural partner on that. And also at the same time, our global presence is increasing, and we really want to make our participation as a responsible global stakeholder. We are taking a lot of efforts in advocating to issues like environmental protection, water management problems, scarcity of water, climate. So as a new and responsible stakeholder, we are interested in high-level dialogue as well, which will put a framework and more confidence into business level cooperation as well.
Thank you. This is our last question before the open Q&A, and we have a total of 9 minutes left. So the question is this. So let's say that I have a firm here in Texas, and I am interested in expanding to Poland or Hungary. What's first? What do I do? Do I call one of you, or what will you do? Will you send me to an accelerator, VCs, or a chamber of commerce? What happens next? Zuzana?
Well, so in the past 5 years, our agency has worked on 97 investment projects from the United States. This year, last year, we specifically out of Austin, we worked with WP Engine in opening up a back-end office in Krakow. And our agency, again, we have our mission is to help Polish exporters, and that's primarily what we do on the ground in Texas. But in Warsaw, we have a Center for Strategic Investment. They're staffed with over 150 experts who speak 11 languages, have ties to, again, agencies like Marcin's. They will connect you with partners. They will help you with site selections. It's a very involved process, but I am that first point of contact, me and Paulina in our office. And so yeah, we're that first point of contact for American companies. And then we connect them to our center in Warsaw, and then they take the process on.
Okay, thank you. Staying with Poland, Marcin?
As I mentioned before, and I agree with Zuza, we will definitely love to get an email or any kind of LinkedIn invite text, because we'll be happy to guide you sort of every step of the way. I would say that what we decided a long time ago is that we want to be your guide, basically. So we will provide the data, we'll provide the reports, we'll provide basically everything you need if you're planning, and then if you decide to come for a local visit, all you need is to book your ticket and book your hotel, because we'll pick you up at the airport and make sure you focus on the proper stuff. So basically just push the enter on the email and enjoy the ride. Zuza is there, I'm here. But I mean, who knows what can happen, right? Candice, you know that I'm not just, whistling Dixie.
You're awesome. I'll see you again in the spring. Gabor, you're up.
Yeah, so I well, with the technology, the same thing. I'm also involved with a lot of video conferencing. We do our video conference series on certain topics which are of mutual interest. Space, health, energy, etc. But our ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, is sort of incorporated under one umbrella, the business and trade promotion. So the agencies of investment promotion or export promotion are direct subsidiaries, I would call. So basically, I have access to all services, and also we provide complex management consultancy services to anyone who is interested in working with Hungarians or working in Hungary, including supplier development, or we can actually show certain projects as well. Most of the actual projects from Texans are reinvestments companies. Exxon, Flowserve, BlackRock, and National Instruments are constantly investing towards high value added created. So coming from a simple manufacturer, we are more and more doing R&D, engineering work, just based with this healthy cooperation that we have with the companies, and we have some smaller stakeholders as well, from the oil sector or business solutions as well. We have companies from Waco, El Paso, Huntsville, so not only from the big cities. So yes, just we are really open. My office is really busy, but there's always some time to help new initiatives. We were able to form a Hungarian American Texas Chamber of Commerce of Texas, which is also by venue for incoming and outgoing business opportunities. So yes, you just get engaged with us at some point, and we would be more than happy to help and cooperate.
Wonderful. Here's our first question from the audience. So in terms of global expansion, it's really easy to find large examples of large firms that have gone from the United States and expanded into your country, such as State Street Bank, Intel, Amazon, Google. in Poland, and then of course IBM and GE and Hungary and many more. So the question is, could you please give examples of maybe smaller or medium-sized firms or Texas-based firms that have expanded into your areas? Marcin?
Yes, favorite small example of the example itself is big, but the company is still small. Was JazzPay, a startup that we help, one of the multiple international startups that we're sort of nurtured as the first wave of the beneficiaries of our little bridge that we're trying to build with basically with US startups, both in technology and biotech and some other areas. We're hoping to get more companies from Texas. There are 3 at this time. I'm sorry, but I still can't disclose the names. They're in the process, but there's 3 US tech startups in the pipeline. Obviously, most of the beneficiaries are from Europe and I'd say the one from Middle East. The biggest advantage now is that from 2019 we have a dedicated program for maybe not yet accelerating, but the special, as I said, nurturing of the very early stages of the startups. So it's both financial and non-financial aid on the very first steps, just settling in, and then directly guiding the company under the wings of a business accelerator.
Thank you. Susanna.
Currently we're working with three tech companies from Texas that are looking to open up a division in Poland. Again, we can't disclose who they are because of confidentiality yet, because nothing's official. And that's in terms of, we've set up meetings for them with different municipalities, localities, in terms of them to find out what kind of cooperation there is between local universities, accelerators. Are there any grants available to them? The Polish government does offer a grant for startups that are looking to make Poland their launch pad for Central Europe. It's called Startup Poland. I highly recommend you check it out. There is funding available, which is a great program, especially for early stage not mid-stage startups from the US that are, again, looking to access that customer base. The EU provides American startups with, almost access to 500 million customers, potential customers, which is amazing. I did mention WP Engine as a company we worked with from Austin. This was a little before our time. Our office has only been around for about 2 years, but in 2015, SolarWinds opened up an office in Krakow. And then we have a couple of real estate companies in Houston, Hines and Apollo, that have divisions in Poland. So there is movement, and there's movement the other way. Despite COVID, we're working now with potentially 4 Polish companies that are looking to open up offices in Texas, and working with the local chambers. The Austin Chamber of Commerce is a great resource for us. The Houston Greater Houston Partnership is wonderful. So it's really been just an exciting time despite COVID of all of this happening. But looking to invest in Poland isn't just for larger companies. You really have to look at what your strategic issue, right? Do you want to access more customers? Do you want to cut costs? I mean, there's a number of factors that go into it, but again, it's just not for your company, for your Googles or your Amazons, which are very welcome and have done a lot to bolster the economy in Poland, but SMEs are also very welcome. And we're more than happy to help you. If there are any companies out there in the audience that would like more information, we're very happy to guide you through the process.
Thank you, Susanna. Gabor, you touched a little bit on this on your last reply, but feel free to go ahead and elaborate as much as you wish.
Thank you. Just basically, just recently we had a venture capital fund from Austin going to Budapest, just because of the potential in the startup ecosystem in Hungary, and I'm working on replicating that. But yes, as I was saying before, we have about 1.5 billion capital investments originated from Texas into Hungary, and 36 projects. But there's quite a big abundance on that. And the good thing that it is regionally well distributed. So a bit more than 55% went to our capital, and 45% went to regionally, which is really healthy. And among those big ones, like how it works at those big stakeholders, like as I was mentioning, I made out the list. I'll read it out: Flowserve, National Instruments, and BlackRock, ExxonMobil, IBM, Celonis, GE, Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, ADS from HP, Kinetic Concepts, Genesis Energy, Ryan, TTI, or Motivating Graphics. Some of those are, of course, apart from the big ones, but those are family companies going into Hungary and taking advantage of the location and the possibilities, opportunities there. Also, we have a really supportive incentive systems towards incoming businesses. I already mentioned that we have the lowest corporate tax rate, 9% in the total EU. And also we give a lot of potential investment subsidies if you are creating high value added ventures and operations in Hungary. And I also mentioned that we have dynamically adjusted it because, for example, just to mitigate effects of COVID, if you are complying with certain criteria and you can receive funds to mitigate your losses and damages from COVID. So within this package, we are really flexible, and just reiterating that my office is really open to start with new initiatives in this sense and work out the best possible way.
Thank you. Okay, we have 5 minutes left here. This is probably the last question. I'm not going to pick on any one of you, so whoever would like to answer, or whoever might have a deep answer, go ahead. So here it is. So what should Texas companies know about any sort of business or university partnerships which may leverage EU or European Commission funding to drive R&D or other projects in your region? Does anyone have a good handle on that? Marcin, go ahead.
I'd say I think it's Ben's question, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about that. We talked about that briefly my last time in Austin. This is an element mostly under development because, as you probably know, or maybe Susa touched on that briefly, that there are multiple grant schemes and both grants and tax schemes for R&D in Poland, which goes almost double for Pomerania, because we have also on our end regional programs to sort of get the R&D programs boosted. But the program under development we have right now is based on the sort of the idea of a super university, because the University of Gdańsk and Gdańsk University of Technology and the University of the Medical University of Gdańsk, sorry, just signed an agreement, a contract to become a major super university, and that would be also home for the wider array of business relations for the super university. My very strong point of interest, because just to let y'all know, my oldest nephew just graduated from the University of Texas, Austin, and he will also be trying for the new super university in Gdańsk. Hopefully he can bring some life into the exchange as well.
Thank you, Marcin. Zuzana, you look like you're unmuted.
Yeah, there are about 40 R&D centers in Poland with various partnerships with universities. One of the startups from Texas that we've been working with has spoken to the University of Łódź about different possibilities of partnerships. I really think it's sort of a customized approach. There are university commercial transfer technology commercialization transfer offices within Poland. So it's really, I think, again, a curated approach that would have to be taken. And we're more than happy to help any companies or anyone interested in the audience who'd like to learn more about those possibilities, find out more.
On that note, when I was at the University of Gdańsk, I actually sat in on a pitch from a US institution that wanted to work directly with the University of Gdańsk and other universities in Marcin's area. Gabor.
Yes, just nationally, there are so many funds available, and we are also adapting our university educational systems to be competitive. We adapted the dual education system copied from Germany, which basically helps local companies to get well-trained, skilled workforce, even in higher education like engineering, STEM, etc. And referring to R&D funds, there are funds that are available nationally, and there are funds that are available directly from the EU institutions as well. And these are widely used. Usually, the universities are R&D centers, and there's some specialized research centers as well, a lot in physics and sciences like that. So, and there are some tailor-made funds that we can utilize if we want to cooperate with US stakeholders, depending on what is the aim of that cooperation. If you want to do research or academic cooperation, that's a whole different thing. But yes, for the last EU's instrument, International Partnership Fund, which had I believe a 10 billion euro grant, we did that. That can be used for that. And also, let's not forget about bilateral funds make, and your Department of State or our Department of State has some funds available as well for cooperation. Actually, that's one of the tools we are using with one of your incubators in Austin. Right.
Thank you so much, Gabor. And also a special thank you to Ben and Mortada. Thank you, Gabor, Marcin, Zuzana. Thank you for allowing me to talk about Eastern Europe. And thank you all of the attendees that are here listening and learning more. I wish you all a wonderful day. And with no further ado, up next, please stay tuned. Ben Ramirez will moderate the next panel. It's called A New Digital Humanism, a European perspective for tech companies on both sides of the Atlantic. Hurry up and grab your popcorn.
Thank you so much, Candace, and your panelists, fantastic. Austin, we're thinking about doing a roundtable during the Central and Eastern Europe Investment Summit coming up in June. And if anyone has any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer that. Well, I have the pleasure now of introducing our speakers as we explore this new digital humanism. You may have become aware that Austria is leading global initiatives in tech diplomacy, as well as cultural tech diplomacy. This discussion will highlight the experience of companies working with artists and governments on using technology to shape the future and overcome our most pressing global challenges based on a set of common principles and values. Our panelists for this session are Clara Bloom and Council Martin Roschbauer. Clara serves as the head of Open Austria Art and Tech Lab, which was launched last year to enhance the interplay of human and artificial creativity. Clara is also the president of The Grid, which is a global network connecting art, technology, and policy. Clara co-founded The Grid with our second speaker, Martin, who is Austria's first tech ambassador, as well as Austria's consul in San Francisco. Martin focuses his tech diplomacy efforts by engaging tech industry representatives and advocating for best practices and global governance of new technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain. So this is going to be an interactive session. We encourage the attendees to continue placing your questions in the chat. And to kick it off, I'm going to turn to Clara and ask, what is this grid network and why is it needed?
Well, thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're very honored to start this discussion on digital humanism. And in fact, Ben, we've prepared a little presentation deck, if that's okay for you, to walk you through it, because I think it needs a little context in order to grasp the idea that we want to convey. And I think Martin will start us off. I will share my screen if that's okay, and then we can tackle that question in depth.
Wonderful.
All right. Okay.
So it's really great to be here. I hope you can hear me as well, Ben. And thank you also for the kind introduction. Clara and I are going to now present to you. I think Clara needs to share the screen again in our presentation a little bit by what we mean when we talk about a new digital humanism. It's quite a buzzword. It's taken roots in many European countries and also here in Silicon Valley, where we are based, both Clara and I, in fact, in San Francisco. And the organization that we represent, Open Austria, maybe a few words about that, is an organization that we founded in 2016 with the goal to connect our country with Silicon Valley. It's the official Austrian representation in Silicon Valley, and our mission is really to connect the two regions in a variety of fields: business, primarily technology, investment, tech diplomacy as a new field, and we're going to go into what we mean with that, and also the arts. We kind of are a unique joint venture by being basically run by the Austrian Foreign Ministry, but also by the Austrian Trade Commission and the Austrian Business Agency. And our mission really is to shed light on the vast creative and innovative potential of Europe, of Austria, which is a high-tech nation in the heart of Europe, with ties to both Western, Eastern, Northern, and Southern Europe, and also increasingly a global player. So what is tech diplomacy? That's probably the new term that is increasingly becoming important here in the Silicon Valley. And it means that we, as nation states, and Austria is just one of them engaging in this initiative, we believe that engaging Silicon Valley tech companies is on the global stage and on global governance issues about frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence or quantum computing is increasingly becoming necessary. Why? Because we need to initiate a dialogue between nation states and tech companies. We need to include relevant stakeholders from civil society, academia, and the arts on those key technologies, on what citizens and also consumers want. And we bring to tech diplomacy, an unwavering commitment to human rights in the digital age, because human rights are actually affected in a much different way than in the pre-digital age. And therefore, we believe that in order to underpin our foreign policy, but also our domestic policy, we need a new concept, and this is what we call a new digital humanism.
Perhaps I can present myself here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is me. I'm Clara Bloom. As Ben has already pointed out, I run this new department at Open Austria, which is called the Art and Tech Lab. And our slogan is that we explore the interplay of human and artificial creativity. And here the new concept is, of course, artificial creativity, which only a couple of years back would have been a misnomer and a paradox almost, that has now become a new reality, that machines can be creative. There's plenty of papers out there stating this fact. So we're trying to create pilot projects, art projects, almost philosophical endeavors and questions that explore this question by placing artists within tech R&D teams. I'm going to talk about this in depth when I present the grid. So this is really about this blurring border that is more and more starting to blur, and this is where digital humanism will be an important concept to explore, the blurring border between technology and human creativity. This Art and Tech Lab is in fact set out as a laboratory for open and interdisciplinary collaboration, where we encourage art projects that redefine what it means human in this digital age, the age of artificial intelligence. I work really closely with Martin on the tech diplomacy efforts. We lead this effort together, and the Art and Tech Lab works in sync, in concert with policymakers from Europe and the US to advocate for this new digital humanism that humanizes technology through the arts. All right, Martin, take it away.
So if we look at from a bird's eye perspective at one of those key technologies, artificial intelligence, and we look at the three main players in this field. If we look at the European Union with the biggest population of 450 million inhabitants, and of course China much bigger in terms of population, 1.4 billion, and the US with 331 million people. There's all three have kind of similar sizes of GDPs, but in terms of private investment in artificial intelligence by geographic area, we can see that the US is far ahead of the other two, but China is catching up, and so is the rest of the world, and the European Union in this particular area is kind of lagging behind when it comes to private investment. And that, of course, has led, if you look at the trend of the last 10 to 15 years, to a dominance of AI applications and businesses that dominate here from the United States, in particular from Silicon Valley. If you just look at the big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, they dominate their big digital platforms, and they dominate their particular area, whether it's software, whether it's hardware, as in the case of Apple, whether it's retail, online retailing, as is the case of Amazon, and they also overlap in many other areas. And then come the Chinese big companies like Alibaba, Tencent, and then a few other Asian companies, and then you can see that with a very long backlash are some European companies that play a major part in the digital sphere, SIP being one of them. So that's a little bit one of the reasons why tech innovation in the European Union is lagging behind. Clearly in Silicon Valley, one of the biggest companies as SAP has annual revenues, has a market cap of $158 billion. If you compare that to the big US companies, you can see that they are at least 2 or 3 times the size. If we now look at, on the other hand, the benefits of doing business in the European Union, there are a lot of arguments to come to the European Union. It's the world's largest single market. It has one single currency for most of the area of the European Union, Austria certainly included. Mobility has increased tremendously through the efforts of the European integration. And of course, also as a major regulator, of technology, the European Union is attempting to set a single set of rules. And that of course affects key frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence. But we have a feeling that Europe has an ambivalent relationship with technology. I already mentioned one part of this ambivalence, which is that we do not have enough investment. We do not have enough investment in the ecosystem, for example, of key technologies such as artificial intelligence. But there's another side to it as well, that there's an increasing fear by European citizens about the implications of technology on their daily lives when it comes to surveillance, when it comes to infringements on their privacy. There's a lot of fears that big, largely US-based companies infringe on citizens' rights and citizens' privacies. So how has Europe reacted to it? It has reacted largely through regulations on privacy. For example, the General Data Protection Regulation that went into force in 2018, which interestingly enough became a global standard. Many other countries around the globe followed Europe in that. Also California, and here in Silicon Valley, there's been some new privacy regulation, the California Consumer and Privacy Act, that was reshaped in 2 stages and is now very similar to GDPR. There's some recent legislative initiatives I would like to mention, such as the Digital Services Act in 2020 and the Digital Market Act in 2020 that were presented by the Commission in December of last year, which really are an attempt to regulate potential harms coming from digital platforms, but also addressing the problem, or the perceived problem, of market dominance of some of the major players. And of course, just recently, the European Commission introduced an Artificial Intelligence Act that really aimed at looking at potential harms and regulating obligations by the private sector, but also by the government sector when it comes to potential harms and risks of artificial intelligence. So what does tech diplomacy really mean? It means in order to find ways to engage our citizens' interests, to engage with the private sector, and to address some of the fears that the dominance of digital platforms have created among our citizens. And we need to create what is increasingly being lost, which is trust. So to quote our countrywoman, Andrea Jelinek, who happens to be Austrian and used to lead the European Data Protection Board, the data protection agency enforcing GDPR, she said, "I'm convinced that trust is the gold of the 21st century and not data." So it actually points to the business case of, if you invest in trust, if you invest in data protection, it's actually good for your business. And I think there is increasingly cases of businesses that invest in security, which is another big concern, but also in data protection, and therefore are successful in the European market. If we look at another a person here coming from Silicon Valley, who in a discussion that a roundtable that we organized on data protection privacy in Silicon Valley, Chris Riley, who said this is the closest that the US come in strong federal data privacy law in decades. So the discussion now with the new Biden administration is, of course, will the US also follow suit and have a cross-sectoral approach to data protection on a federal level, mirroring the European approach. And then, of course, I would like to also point out that in terms of the geopolitical landscape. We mentioned Europe, we mentioned China, we mentioned the US. It's very, very often mentioned in the geopolitical context as a race, as a kind of new bipolar world between the US and China, largely based on technological supremacy. And if that is the case, and we see some signs that, yes, in the private sector, the US and China are racing ahead. Yes, in terms of research and development, the US and China are racing ahead. What does that mean for Europe? Is there like a third way between the US and China? I think that is a question that not only Europeans need to ask themselves, how do we, as Europeans, but also how do we, as the rest of the world, orient ourselves in this new bipolar world where there might be two parallel universes? And this is to quote Kai-Fu Lee, one of the former head of Google China and now one of the main investors in artificial intelligence in China, who has portrayed these two parallel universes of a internet and of a digital world dominated by the US on the one side, and a separate from that, a world dominated by China. So these are the kind of questions we need to ask ourselves. And on a more, on a deeper level, we need to also look at some of the effects of artificial intelligence on what it means to actually be a human being. When we actually think of future developments of artificial intelligence, of future predictions of machine intelligence surpassing human intelligence, when we look at some of the promises of biotechnology to in some ways transcend the limits of what it means today to be a human being with age and death looming, and technology promising in some ways to overcome those facts of life, and in some ways promising a transhuman future. This has been a dominant ideology in Silicon Valley, and we're quoting here Ray Kurzweil, who in The Age of Spiritual Machines said that the 21st century, our century, will be different. The human species, along with the computational technology it created, will be able to solve age-old problems. It will be in a position to change the nature of mortality in a post-biological future. So this is just one of those claims and statements that in some ways characterize a little bit some of the promises of Silicon Valley, but it also points to some of the fears that it has created among citizens, that technology is really not only there to solve some of our problems, but it is in some ways there to replace us as human beings, because we have become in some ways inferior to what future machine intelligence is promising. We have become also inferior to algorithms when it comes to some or even most of our professions, and we might be replaced in the workplace by artificial intelligence. And then, of course, when there are other areas as well, if we look at warfare dominated by artificial intelligence, what does that mean in terms of security? What does that mean also in terms of maybe these things getting out of control? So there are a lot of anxieties and a lot of fears, and in some ways, artificial intelligence, digital humanism is trying to address these kind of fears and anxiety in the population by addressing and kind of providing a response to this ideology of Silicon Valley that, as the German philosopher Julian Niederrümelin has stated, the ideology of Silicon Valley has started with humanist impulses, which is to solve some of the age-old problems of human beings, only to transform them in anti-humanist dystopias. So we need to, in some ways, encourage technologists, policymakers, artists, philosophers, to rethink what it actually means to be a human being in the age of artificial intelligence, encourage interdisciplinary collaborations, break up the silos also of our disciplines. We shouldn't only be experts in what we do, but we need to open up the dialogue and engage in this dialogue, in this important conversation of the future of humanity, in order to assure that future technologies are designed and employed for the benefit of all. So why is Austria a global hub for digital humanism? Why is it kind of our official strategy in foreign policy, which we employ in Silicon Valley, but which we also employ in other countries around the world, that when we talk about digitalization, because we see ourselves as a geopolitical meeting point between East and West and different ideological value systems. We have a long tradition in that. Vienna, our capital, the seat of many international organizations like the UN, the Atomic Energy Agency, as well as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, some of them remnants of the Cold War. So we are, in a sense, used to negotiate, to bring very, very different partners together when it comes to confrontations. And some of the future confrontations will be about technology. Just think of what is happening when it comes to nuclear energy, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, and the ongoing discussions between the United States that have re-entered the agreement between Iran and a number of world powers. And those negotiations are happening in Vienna as we speak. Austria is also the culture tech hub in the heart of Vienna, with a long tradition of not only artistic institutions, a strong history of philosophy, a strong history of art, but also a strong history of digital arts. Ars Electronica in Linz being the oldest and biggest art and technology festival in the world. And that leads me over to Clara to talk a little bit about that specific way of how we engage.
Yes, thank you, Martin. I think that sets the stage nicely to dive into our EU project, which we started in Silicon Valley as Austrians, but together with our European colleagues. So that's called The Grid, with our slogan, Art Powers Technology. It is a network connecting art, tech, and policy. So who are we? This network was started by a cluster of European EU National Institutes for Culture. That's Europe's soft power arm of the European Commission. It is a ways that we EU member states can organize ourselves through the arts, through art and culture when we're sent abroad. So this particular cluster, unique Silicon Valley, was founded in 2019 with a special focus on the intersection of art and technology, given the environment that we were operating in. It has 7 members: the French Consulate General in San Francisco, Italian Cultural Institute, the Goethe Institute, Swiss Next, Consulate General of Ireland, Flanders Government Delegation of the US, and the Austrians, us, Open Austria. We started the cluster and we held the presidency for 2 consecutive years, and the project has now become self-sufficient. This is why it is its own NGO, nonprofit, and I'm the president of that. So why did we start this? Now that we've seen the context in which we operate, which is highly important to understand, we thought that it was important, particularly in Silicon Valley, to pursue a strategy of cultural diplomacy and relations, where we leverage what we call European art thinking as a soft power tool. So the idea was basically to introduce digital humanism and this art thinking, which I will dive into in a second, into the actual development of new technologies. So that was the aha moment that we had, that in order to have an impact in Silicon Valley, we would have to try to approach the tech industry where we could actually make a difference, which is in the development and the research of frontier technologies. And the hopes was that through that strategy, we might be able to humanize technology through the arts, show a different perspective to technology, allow artists to broaden the horizons of some of the technologies and tech CEOs that they encounter. So, and how did we do that? The first step obviously was to engage with the cultural context that we operated and really convince our local partners that this is an initiative that they should join. So this was very work intense. We had a gazillion meetings with tons of individual artists, art organizations, universities, and tech companies, people that wanted to align around this common set of values, given that we are encountering a new digital reality, which harbors a lot of potential, but also a lot of risks and potential harms that we need to mitigate. So the first thing we did is we commissioned a report. This has actually been, it has been 2 very in-depth report to understand how tech companies could collaborate with the arts. we talked to 13 tech companies in Silicon Valley and mapped out 6 different collaborative models of how this collaboration could actually happen in practical terms. I'd be happy to share both reports at the end of the presentation. We very, very clearly mapped out what the added value of this initiative could be, the added value of matching artists and technologists within R&D teams of tech companies. So there's, of course, a lot of added value for the artists, which was an easy thing to convince them of, but it was not everything but a trivial task to convince tech companies to open their sacrosanct R&D teams to welcome artists within their development teams. And once they did, the results were beautiful, beautiful to look at. I am sorry, this was getting ahead of myself. So through this report, we get closer and closer to the core of our mission, and which we then identified as art powers technology to inherently understand that artistic practices are part of technological development. They have been since the birth of Silicon Valley, and they should have their rightful place back at the core of tech development now. And I would like to share a little mood film to emphasize this point a little further.
Technology flings us into the future, towards efficiency and productivity and speed. What do these achievements give us, and what do they strip away? In art, we create our most profound aspirations. We recognize who we are and imagine who we must become. Both art and technology show us our horizons and seek to transcend these limits. Our world teeters on the brink of collapse. To meet this challenge, artists and technologists must come together to imagine, to make, to create. The grid connects these two worlds by fusing their strengths, because art powers technology.
Yes, so once we understood that, the idea was born that there's a matchmaker needed in this space. So there needs to be an authority that is recognized as an authority to bring artists from Europe over and place them within tech companies in Silicon Valley, place also artists from all around the US within tech companies, basically just create this match between art and tech. And as cultural facilitators, we wanted to take that role, and we took that role on and have been doing this for 2 years successfully. Furthermore, we understood that there's a third silo, which in the context of technology, it's imperative that we should include in this initiative, and that's the policy silo. Because technology is shaped through creative minds, through technologists, and lastly, also nowadays, through policymakers. This is such an important sphere to discover. And mostly what we've encountered is that art, tech, and policy, they all experience, let's say, they shape the reality of tech development, but at the same time, they live in very different digital realities. The way they perceive technology can be profoundly different. It can be shaped through their professional backgrounds, but ultimately through the work reality. So what we need to do is bring those silos together in order to create a shared set of values, but also a common language that can be shared around technology. So that's imperative, and a language that we can use in multilateral fora, but just that we can create a common understanding of what it means to be human in this digital age. So the grid is connecting these three worlds in a variety of initiatives. Before the pandemic, we launched several events that were highly successful in the Bay Area, talking about these topics, symposia and summits, panel discussions. 2020 was supposed to be a huge year. We wanted to make a splash at South by Southwest, and of course, none of that happened. But we bounced back, and in 2020, we created a first festival in the San Francisco Bay Area, which actually was virtual, so it was a global festival with attendees from all around the world. Over 100 speakers and artists created interactive art pieces, discussions, and we brought policymakers into this realm, into this discussion with creative minds. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And I think I have a festival trailer to share. Welcome to the Grid Exposure Art, Tech and Policy Days.
Hello, everyone.
And welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. We have to probably revisit what it means to be creative, because if a machine generates something not to make a human feel great, but to make another machine feel great, like, you know, is that still art or music?
To equip ourselves with loads of research and knowledge because there's going to be a lot of naysayers against UBI.
Artists with catalytic thinking could really push industry toward different, as you say, disruptive, I guess, solutions that they hadn't thought of and are uncomfortable with.
You go into this very uncanny valley where it sounds like a saxophone, but it's not really quite a saxophone.
So it's a very intimate form of AI, which is not something that most people experience. Right? Usually when we think about AI, we're thinking about this like domineering corporate structure or something that's like doing things to us instead of this internal intimate tool.
So we have machine listening and we have a saxophonist who does what great musicians always do, which is include the body and the feedback mechanisms of the response of the computer to help the machine do better.
We need fundamentally new kinds of human rights because our technology has a new sort of cognitive dominance that can like override ours.
We do actually want to go into a process of mutual listening and learning and into a spirit of dialogue, and then come up together with activities and initiatives that make sense in a certain environment and context. And I think this is why we can have projects like the Grid.
I absolutely have to become a more artistically creative policymaker. I frankly had never considered that before, but I can certainly see how those worlds do intersect.
You know, a human being apparently now cannot defeat a computer in chess, right? But no computer can beat a machine and a human being playing together as a team, right?
Most students in my lab have started calling it the golden ratio of patriarchy, because that number keeps coming up over and over again.
And I think it's going to be fascinating to have that shift where we're no longer necessarily composing at the level of note by note or small idea by small idea and composing more at gestures and sort of bigger picture ideas. I think that could be really exciting.
Yes. So that was Exposure in 2020. We're actually planning on bringing the festival back in the hybrid format in the fall of 2021. Again, like a global showcase of policymakers, artists, and technologies to really talk about these topics. In this last festival, we had state senators, high-ranking diplomats, EU ambassador to the United States, and commissioners. We had Facebook and Google. We had the major players in this sphere that actually shape technology that then has ripple effects throughout the world. And last South by Southwest, this South by Southwest in 2021, we were given a really beautiful slot to present an award called EVE, the EVE Award for creative or collaborative projects between artists and technologists that push the envelope of human and artificial creativity. And the project that was awarded in 2021 was a collaborative artwork between European success author Daniel Kehlmann, who was just recently nominated for the Booker Prize, and a Silicon Valley-based technologist and philosopher called Brian McKenna, who has developed a natural language processing tool that should help writers explore their creative spirit by, and this project, AI Storytelling, was about those two minds coming together and co-writing a short story with an AI. It was a beautiful thing to watch. It got a lot of media attention, and it was awarded during South by Southwest. So Austin obviously is the big convener for this, for these purposes. We'd like to continue that collaboration. A really short clip on that is, so you can see the level in which we operate. So that is, of course, us moderating the whole thing. This is EU Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis. We also had Mark Benioff, CEO and Chair of Salesforce and Executive Vice President for Government Affairs, Eric Loeb, as part of the ceremony. These are the two award winners, Daniel Kehlmann and Brian McKen. We had a live demo with an AI. So Daniel Kehlmann was live writing a little short story with an artificial intelligence. And this is the beautifully 3D printed trophy by Austrian designer Julia Kana, all 100% biodegradable. Well, that was that. It was a blast, and we'll be back next year, hopefully in the flesh. Okay, so basically what's next? We want to pilot lots of these projects. We want to bring as many artists as possible into these tech R&D teams and have these conversations about the future of human creativity and try to explore the limitations or even the potential of the human spirit. So furthermore, we want to experiment with more modes and models of collaboration between art, tech, and policy as this new silo that we want to explore. We want to continue our successful formats like the EVE Award ceremony during South by Southwest and our festival here in the Bay Area, Exposure, Art, Tech, and Policy Days. And furthermore, we want to grow the grid into a truly global network for artists, technologists, and policymakers. Right now, we have lots of partners in Europe, a lot of partners in the US, but clearly we want to expand our realm of influence to Asia, Africa, and other continents. So make this a truly global effort, because whatever impact we have in Silicon Valley or other tech hubs around the world where we can really shape technology at its core with a set of principles, trying to humanize technology through artistic thinking, that will eventually have ripple effects throughout the entire globe, throughout the global population. So that's the idea of the grid. And I hope some of you who have now listened to this presentation will consider joining our efforts. With that, I'll hand over to Martin again.
Well, thank you, Clara. So as you can see, we are engaging with companies who have, in some cases, approached us directly and said, how can we engage with you? How can we engage in the project The Grid? But how can we also engage with digital humanism? Because digital humanism really is not just a valuable concept for governments or for citizens. It's also a valuable concept for companies. And it can serve kind of as a compass for businesses to navigate the digital transformation. In some ways, defining the business culture of individual companies by in some ways, agreeing on a set of values that essentially put the human back into the center of future technological developments, and thereby creating trust among citizens and clients. So how to implement digital humanism? You can incorporate artists into your R&D teams, and we would love to help you with this project. You can approach us in the framework of the grid, as Clara mentioned, but you also can establish human rights impact assessment tools for your products and services, and we'd be also happy to talk to you about that. In the end, if you would like to join the digital humanism movement that combines the worlds of art, tech, and policy, the easiest thing to do is get on the grid and join the movement and approach us. We'd be happy to work with you if you are a business in the digital world, but even in the non-digital world. Thank you for your attention. Clara and I can be reached at Open Austria anytime. And here's also information about the website on the grid, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you both, Clara and Martin, for this presentation. I hope we're able to share it, because I think I saw a couple individuals weren't able to see the slides, I believe. So if we could share that with our attendees later, that would be much appreciated. And one question that did come up, but each ecosystem is different. The European tech ecosystem, the Silicon Valley, and then the Central Texas tech ecosystem. Some of us trust technology more than others, And bridging that gap in terms of digital diplomacy is very important. And so I know you both have your work cut out for you, but could you talk a little bit more about how you would approach the Central Texas tech community in your projects?
So maybe just a word for myself, and then I'll hand over to Clara. I think for us, Central Texas is an incredibly interesting area as we reach out to expand our initiative across the globe, but also, of course, across the US. We are very well aware that there are differences from the West Coast to the East Coast to a place like Austin or other places in Texas that have an incredibly dynamic tech scenes with you know, a lot of talent streaming into your area from all around the world. Even from Austria, there's a program from Austria to Austin, which brings startups from Austria to the Austin area. And that is very important for us. Also, your relationship to creativity. After all, Austin is the seat of South by Southwest. So you have an open mind, an open mindset, and you're attracting lots of creative talent from around the world. So I think your region and the companies based in your area would be the ideal partners to think with us together about our initiative and join us.
Yes, really nothing further to add on that. I just want to also point out that in order to really properly represent all the stakeholders out there, we need to diversify a little bit, and it cannot just be this myopic view on policymakers from the EU, handpicked artists from the European Union, and several of the big major tech companies in Silicon Valley. It has to be a diverse spectrum of smaller companies, startups with different ideas. And it's obvious that the big platforms use technologies, our technology, embody technology, but everyone uses technology nowadays. It's not just restricted to tech companies. So digital humanism is not just this ivory tower idea that is just really designed for Facebook and Google. On the contrary, digitalization is omnipresent. It has invaded every single aspect of the human experience in the 21st century. So this is really a concept that should be applicable for everyone, from the school kid that starts to engage with technology and wants to be a digital literate, so to speak, trying to navigate digitalization and the internet with all its potential, but also with all its pitfalls, to the major tech CEOs. And there's so many facets and so many pillars in between that we need to reach out to and include into this conversation. It's very important that we bring this conversation out of the ivory tower and engage with diverse communities. And it would be fascinating to extend our scope of influence and of discussion to the community in Texas.
Yes, artists, as you know, Clara being one yourself, a recording artist, inspire innovation and risk-taking, and bringing that into the public policy realm, especially, but also in the tech realm, is very important and inspires new ideas, etc. So I want to thank you both for your spending some time with us this morning, afternoon, and I really appreciate your insight on this new frontier for us.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
All right, and now I have the pleasure of handing off to our next panel, and our moderator is Elizabeth Jennings, who is an international principal at Venture Atlas Labs and on the Southwest Angel Network's board of directors, focusing on healthcare. Elizabeth and her panel will explore healthcare and clean tech, specifically focusing on sustainable growth and new transatlantic opportunities in science innovation. Hello, Elizabeth, how are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ben, for having us on this wonderfully rainy Tuesday. I feel like we have the opportunity to dive into some really interesting things that are happening in the world right now. So moving from arts, now we're going to talk about science innovation. We have a half hour to dive into a huge range of topics across policy, the way this is shaping the investment landscape, areas like market access. Certainly, as you think about us coming out of 2020, there's been huge shifts in priorities, focuses, reevaluating what matters as you think about the strategy across the transatlantic relationships, really. So I'm very excited to hear what each of our panelists have to say. Please, as we dive into this, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat. We would love to hear how you may see this applying to your own businesses, to your own strategic planning into the rest of this year. And feel free, if we don't get a chance to answer your question today, to drop that into LinkedIn, tag any of us, and we'll be happy to share thoughts and resources with you as we move on. So jumping into this, I'd like to introduce our three panelists for this afternoon. We have with us Van Truscott, John Soering, and Sebastian Torre. And I will let them each introduce themselves, but I highly recommend that you reach out to each of us on LinkedIn, connect with us with our various resources and offerings, events that we have going on. This is, again, a huge range across science innovation, and I think that it could be very useful to many of our attendees. So starting off with Van Truscott, she has been the Executive Director of the Texas Innovation Center at the University of Texas at Austin. She is nationally recognized and a highly awarded leader across a range of cutting-edge technologies, from semiconductor equipment manufacturing, which is, of course, a big topic these days, to inkjet printing, developments, hugely fascinating and complex nanoparticles, through chemical engineering applications. Van, could you take a moment to explain to us more of your background and what you're currently focused on today?
Yes, thank you for having me here today, Elizabeth. It's wonderful to be with you and and John and Sebastian. Can't wait to hear their thoughts on this topic today. So I now work for the University of Texas at Austin, the Executive Director of the Texas Innovation Center. And what we're focused on is creating a safe environment for our faculty on campus, along with grad students and students in general, to explore entrepreneurship and figure out pathways to take the research, which is typically very deep tech driven, and be creative in terms of evaluating whether there's a business proposition there to then flip it over the wall into the real marketplace. And so working closely with the VPR's office, as well as the Office of Technology Commercialization. And, having a background in startup world, coming out of a startup that had technology coming out of UT, really helps me to understand or provide some insight in terms of how we could make this happen for other technologies on UT. So would love to talk to you all about that industry, academic, collaborative role, and how we kind of spread this to the rest of the world.
Thank you so much, Van. I really value your perspective, because you're right there on the forefront of many different competing forces, many different forces that hold up these bridges in realizing new technologies, often because it wasn't available before now. So you're really on the cutting edge of finding what a market fit may be, or what something could impact an entire industry with. So I very much look forward to your insights through this conversation. Next up, we have John Soering, who's been a corporate leader and a global executive at IBM. He led all of the industry-specific global businesses, including their healthcare and energy business. He's transformed the Danish healthcare system to realign toward preventative healthcare and the world's first national smart energy and water grids in Malta. He has many incredible accomplishments in his work in Europe as often as he has North America. Now he is a serial investor in sustainability and healthcare technologies. John, could you tell us a bit more about your background and what you're currently focused on?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for inviting me to participate today. I've enjoyed listening to all the other speakers on your panels, and it's particularly of interest to me since both my educational life and my work life have been involved in Europe and in North America.
For the past 10 years, since my retirement from IBM, I've been an investor and involved in a variety of philanthropic activities. My focus in life since my retirement has been in the areas of clean water, clean energy, and preventative healthcare. And they're all three linked together because one of the major causes of some of the major significant health problems in the world are transmitted to human beings through the air and water. And as such, I've had family members who have been adversely affected and many friends, and I'm sure those of you on this particular webinar have had similar experiences, but it's been a great motivator for me to donate money philanthropically to academic research projects around the world, and from that to support startup companies and large-scale companies, particularly in the area of clean energy, clean water, and preventative health care. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, John. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're also joined by Sebastian Torre of the European American Enterprise Council. He has more than 20 years experience in everything international business, economic, investment developments across Europe and the US. He has been a lifelong bridge builder for entrepreneurs everywhere. He founded the European American Enterprise Council. He leads European innovators engaged in the European Network of Research and Innovation Centers, also known as Enrich, which leads soft landing programs at Temple University and other partner universities. So he is very much at the forefront of all things on shifting landscapes. Sebastian, could you tell us a bit about your background as you join us today?
Yes, hello, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for the invitation. And quite a great panel. Thank you again. I'm going to focus a little on Enrich. I guess that's why we have a logo close to me, so that we can have a focus on specific topics about the European Commission and what they do in Europe, but also outside of Europe in the United States. As you can see, I have a little French accent after 22 years. I kept that, I cherish it, I guess. And I've been here for 22 years, and I always have been working on collaboration between US and Europe, corporations and government type of projects. So one of them is Enrich, is the creation of that network of research and innovation centers and hubs, a lot centered around the universities. We use incubators and innovation centers as launch pads. We're talking to different ecosystems in the US, obviously including Austin, through UT Austin, talking to Tech French. We participate at a lot of the South by Southwest type of activities every year. And that's also how we met with Elizabeth. And so we'd be glad to talk about those two topics, medtech and cleantech, and what has been happening, and how COVID has had an impact. So I think we have some good insights on, as I said, on the European Commission side, on the funding side, and how they are pushing for more transatlantic collaboration with the US amid COVID.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sebastian. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Elizabeth Jennings, has been introduced. My contextual background that may be worth elaborating on here is I run Venture Atlas Labs, an international consulting firm working on bringing new portfolio companies, new business units, new innovations to the US. We work on 3 continents and across Europe, across South America, and Australasia, internationalizing their portfolio. We work exclusively in healthcare, so I can talk at length about regulatory systems and all of the fantastic complications that come along with that, about changing business models, about risk analyses. These technologies, if you're looking at health tech, you're looking at life science or renewables, have huge rippling impacts across valuation, across other related segments, across other ways we do things. They have deep meaning and deep shift. And as a result, if you are working in corporate development and strategic planning, if you're working in private equity, evaluating market shifts can be very complicated. They take a long time to move. And you see ripples caused by things like COVID, caused by our new administration shifts, having much greater wave effects throughout both of these huge sectors on both sides of the Atlantic. If you work primarily, as the 4 of us do, in different ways and shifting those priorities and understanding how those impact business, how those impact investment, it's very important to understand how to read the uncertainty of what we see coming out of 2020, of what may be new priorities, the impacts of those. We are all working with incomplete data and have to figure out how to interpret these things. How do you move these things? How do you create more value, whether it's on the policy side or economic development, if you're in business development, if you're looking for new ways to help lower things like cost of entry in some of these more complicated regulated markets. This is a critical area to discuss. So again, I encourage you to think about applications in your own business, in your own world. Drop us a question as we move on. We will have time for Q&A. I certainly hope so at the end. Okay, so jumping in on some shifting priorities and opportunities in healthcare. As I mentioned, we've had huge accelerations caused by COVID across both sides of the Atlantic in the development of things like digital health and telemedicine. Adoption has skyrocketed. We've had a lot of reluctant, siloed, fragmented sectors within healthcare itself, and that's caused huge changes on every side of the bridge of how you lead these sectors. We've seen this impact human lives. We've seen this impact taxes. It's very meaningful. So as we think about how COVID has actually changed our priorities and our attitudes, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the risks and complexities that this has caused. Van, could you share us a bit, from your perspective? You've been working in tech transfer, you've worked in early ideation and finding where the potential fit could be in groundbreaking new technologies. Have you seen COVID change attitudes? I mean, we're always working with lots of risk, technical risk, there's market risk, there's investment risk in these areas. But do you think COVID has changed the appetite for market risk?
I think it has, but just in a different way than what we have seen it. I think at least from the university level with academic research that we're focused on, COVID has actually accelerated the creation of intellectual property, as well as, this call to action to do something to address the situation of the pandemic. I mean, as you know, UT is a key player in the development of the vaccine with Dr. McClellan's lab's work contributing to this. And so, it's created this environment where, yes, we're all moving online and we are more active and intentional in terms of what we're doing, but we have so much more information to carry out what is needed to be done. And so there's a lot of information sharing that I've seen in the last year with everyone going online and things moving more and more digitally. And so yes. Yeah.
I love that so much, because when you think about risk and you are an innovator, you're working with a university, you have collaborators for something new, that collaboration, especially if you're working on something like a global pandemic and addressing that in different ways, sharing that risk helps us move so much faster. And obviously, if you're talking about the vaccine development, for instance, or anything to do with COVID specifically, that IP has to move quickly. We can't have the usual hurdles and sit and think about it too long. We have to have a plan of action. So I love that you've seen that increase throughout the pandemic. John, you spent a great deal of your career working on both sides of the Atlantic, executing new technologies and processes. There's been very complicated environments that you've worked in that had many factors that had to change for these technologies to gain access, to be valued, and the workflows created there within to be adopted. And now you're engaged more from an investment and leadership perspective. At the moment, we've seen this really interesting convergence of shifting global policies and practices in healthcare that's been largely streamlining business models and helping to reduce some of the traditional fragmentation and siloing that you see, particularly manifested in areas like diagnostics and healthcare in Europe. But we're also seeing the hesitation rut from COVID as people wait and see what's going to happen. We have had very fragmented ways and approaches towards reopening or reprioritizing. Are we investing or reinvesting? Then just the strategic decision making has had starts and stops. Do you see that the general health tech market is becoming more or less accessible, especially for companies that are established in one regional market and expanding to another? Or do you think that we are accelerating more despite some of the traditional access barriers?
From what I've seen from both my prior work at IBM as well as during the past 10 years, is that there's been recently an acceleration, a tremendous acceleration to solving some of the healthcare issues. As an example, one of the projects, as you referenced, Elizabeth, was the transformation of the Danish healthcare system, which is relatively easy to work with compared to the United States, since Denmark is a single payer healthcare system and the US is a multi-payer, so it's much more complex. But because of its focus, it was able to shift its healthcare delivery from a reactive system where you fix the healthcare problem after it's occurred to a preventative system. And when you think about the pandemic and what could have been prevented had the public healthcare officials and the elected politicians all been working together in this, we could have prevented many of the deaths around the world. So I think it's unfortunately a good example that could lead to tremendously positive transformations in the healthcare industry. From our prior work I had done, just to talk about the economic impact, not of the pandemic so much, but diseases in general, there are 4 chronic disease groups that contribute to the majority of US healthcare spending. And over 80% of those cases are preventable. So imagine if we could focus on prevention of pandemics and preventions of diseases that are preventable, we could have a huge positive economic benefit that could go back to reducing taxes as well as money being spent on other things.
I certainly hope that we see, to your point, more emphasis on preventative care, more emphasis on the actual patient impact value metrics. If you're looking at a new healthcare technology and adoption, investment, valuation in these things, there's a saying in the US healthcare system at the moment, we're looking at value-based care. We have a couple of organizations like Kaiser Permanente out there. We have various models, but really we're still largely on the dock of pay per service. We have one foot on that boat for value-based, one foot on the dock for pay per service, and the boat's leaving and we don't know which way to jump yet. So It's very complicated. Hopefully we'll start to see some change come out of the pandemic towards things like prevention, towards awareness of access and barriers to healthcare that have we've seen the direct impact of that. And the access barriers, to one of the points, is making sure that we can accelerate things like IP, that we can collaborate more freely to be able to realize those technologies.
And we are seeing some of those changes in the United States. We had predicted 15 to 20 years ago that eventually the Kaiser Permanente model of healthcare, where insurers and providers are all in one group delivering healthcare services, would become a more common model in the United States. And now we're seeing with United Health Group greatly expanding, and now CVS, as historically a drugstore pharmaceutical company, getting into healthcare delivery on a massive scale and buying up all the private practices and clinics that they can at a very rapid rate.
Yeah, I expect that we'll see more exploration into different models as well, because now we have not just the priority and the attention, the spotlight on how we adopt these new things, but also I think the willingness, because we're so heightened around the risk of failure. So we know we need to incorporate different functions. We know we need to make them more visible to the general patient population. So hopefully we'll see more experiments and we'll be able to continue to refine the models that work the best here for us. And certainly having a European perspective on those could be very valuable for us. Sebastian, I've been very interested. You're involved in many European perspectives in the innovation programs, on immersion programs, as the innovators are focused on market entry in the US. That can be quite the whiplash if you're coming from that healthcare perspective in Europe. Oftentimes it involves reevaluating your model entirely, your pricing, your positioning, your competitive strategy. They can be very different worlds. How have you seen priorities change due to COVID? Especially in these reputed international conventions like BIO coming up in June. Have you seen the priorities really change radically, or are most of these events with these esteemed innovators largely the same as they were before the pandemic? Sebastian, are you muted?
Yeah, I wanted to be muted just earlier. Sorry for that. So as you notice, everything became cloud and cloud computing. Everything became digital. Health records became very important in Europe. We had a problem of GDPR, the privacy, integration of data. So I come from the software space, so I did a few exits in the content management and document management. So it's fascinating to see that again, a topic because it was a topic 20 years ago, but there was no real solution. So now everybody has been working actively on it because amid COVID, and but it's happening, and it's happening very fast. Quantum computing is gonna be even pushed to the forefront of everything, because now we're talking also about genetics and everything. And so now it's we have to find a solution and all together collaborate on all those solutions. So the topic of collaboration just came up. We noticed that well, we are one world. The pandemic touched everyone. There's not one place that has been more protected than others. So some people were more maybe prepared, but we see that in some regions like the Seychelles, where they had vaccinated everyone, it's coming back. So there is not one place you're more protected. But I think if we collaborate more, going back to what was brought earlier, prevention, better at diagnostics, better efficient therapies, all of that are what But each time we have a new pandemic or a new virus, it's coming back, and then 10 years after, do we really learn? So that's a question mark. On the collaboration front, I think what you see in all those big trade shows, so we are very active in trade shows, and that's where we make sure that Europe is represented, or all the researchers, entrepreneurs have a chance to interact with their counterparts in the US and also in trade shows in Europe. So it could be Medica, it could be Hannover Messe. There's different trade shows that are very important for those industries. And what happened is you all heard about matchmaking. It was a big thing in Europe with, in fact, Enterprise Europe Network. So we are also a member of Enterprise Europe Network, which was really, we started implementing those concepts of matchmaking, physical matchmaking at trade shows, and pushing everyone to meet each other, not just meet by accident. And now everything is online. All those big trade shows have matchmaking. So Web Summit did an amazing job launching Web Summit with a matchmaking platform, but the Bio Show with, in fact, the technology comes from a French company from Innova Software. They came up with a platform very early. So first it's a matchmaking event, and then it's a trade show. And they achieve about 50,000 meetings at a show. 50,000 meetings when you talk about one industry that has a very much a streamlined process between biotech and pharma. So you give a chance to all the guys working on really new, groundbreaking technologies, and to talk early to the companies that probably going to fund them or help them go to a next step. That's a big shift. So all the trade shows became during the year. They became digital or virtual. You all saw that, but matchmaking became really paramount, and that pushed that collaboration to that extreme where we don't have to travel. we can talk, we can initiate conversation, and we can even close deals without having to meet. So that's a big paradigm shift when you talk about internationalization and our R&I collaboration. So that's been really helping us tell the world that at the end we are one world and we should be working together. And when we have a pandemic like what we had, well, it's definitely the right moment to address that. And but we've been helped with the technologies that are available. So we also been working for under Enrich on the own platform for ecosystem to work together so that they can collaborate around their technologies and startups and have a way to work on their KPIs together. So it's like a territory ecosystem to ecosystem platform. So also us, that pushed us to come up with new solutions for collaboration. So
I appreciate that so much. Exactly. Your last point pushed you to find new solutions. I think that's been true across every sector, across every function as well. We've all had to, adopt to this new world and help define how we can accomplish maybe even new goals and with new metrics of success. Shifting the gears a little bit, but still staying on the same front of international collaboration. You had a point, Sebastian, around this impacted all of us. And I think that's so important. I know we're probably all quite tired of talking about COVID, but unfortunately, the ramifications, or maybe even fortunately, the ramifications are going to shift things likely through the rest of our lives in how we think about going forth in these different functions. And we'll see leveling of the playing field, we'll see new opportunities created. And one of those is when we do have something that is a global event that affects almost everyone on this planet. I do think there are new opportunities for international collaboration that maybe have different metrics, different funding sources, different players in there. Van, could you tell us a little bit, are you seeing more opportunities for international collaboration, more multinational teams or funding research, multi-country presences? Anything to do with, clean tech? We're talking about global warming, climate change, rising tides. Everyone needs to manage consumption of energy with production. There's huge geopolitical implications with that, as well as healthcare. So in these big global shifts we're seeing right now, are you seeing more of those multinational, international collaboration opportunities?
Yes, I am. And I see that with my own interactions as we're reaching out to form partnerships. Actually, yesterday I was just meeting with the Science and Technology Attaché for the French Embassy and was sitting on their panel, their judging panel, to review a handful of technologies from France that might have opportunities here in the United States, and trying to figure out, okay, are there researchers here that we can connect them with to help validate the technology and, out and bring upon more research and innovation as those companies are developing. And so definitely, and very interested in it. We are also reaching out to internationally known accelerators and investors. We're working with Antler VC, and what a great bunch of people there. Tyler is a wonderful partner, literally a partner of the firm, but also a partner working with us and sitting in on various meetings with our academic founders and providing insights. So I think broadness of perspective coming, not just regionally and nationally, but international perspective also gives a very well-balanced understanding of what market drivers are. And, you mentioned clean tech, and it might be kind of provocative, but, I think of clean tech really as climate tech. That's what we're really talking about, right? And so, over the last decade, we had 8 out of 10 of the warmest years in history. Our governments worldwide are starting or have adopted climate change initiative, from Japan pledging to be carbon neutral by 2050 and China by 2060. And of course, the European Union's 2030 climate target plan is aiming to be, let me see if I can remember this right. I believe what they're trying to do is reduce greenhouse gas emission to 55% below their 1990 targets, with full carbon neutrality expected by 2050. So that's pretty amazing. And so when you hear about these market drivers and you think about, okay, as a research institution, as UT, what can we do to really leverage these needs? And so we look at our own battery research and materials research. And another market driver that has accelerated, or I'd like to think that it's accelerating alternative energy technologies, is the best example is solar. And what solar has been able to provide as an example and as a sort of like a gateway for other alternative energy source is that, you know, it's an indicator that if you can orient climate impact technologies in a way that it can achieve economies of scale and reach pricing parity that is comparable to traditional sources like coal, oil, and natural gas, then, you know, we could look at solar as being a potential example for other up and coming energy sources. And so, you know, that leads to essentially, you know, things like battery technology. So at UT, we are working on a technology that reduces the amount of cobalt that's being used in lithium-ion batteries. And so, you know, that is a material that is not, that has high political ramifications from mining as well as human rights issues. So I think, you know, just those are just a handful of market drivers that really causes us to think about how deep tech can propel climate technologies now and in the future. Yeah.
That's so important. I mean, you have so many great points there. One of those that's always on the top of my mind is especially time to market, cost of market entry, and especially when you have multiplayer organizations, there can be very deep competing priorities, competing funding timelines to meet different milestones. And so sometimes, while you can streamline perspectives around market drivers, like you said, there's also an added complexity around, you know, where you enter, how you expand, and those really key metrics like, you know, like time to market that are functions of time and money and investment. John, would you mind picking up and explaining us your thoughts on aspects like time to market affecting the spotlight on clean tech? You know, we've seen increased M&A activity within industry partners expediting global consumption of these technologies, from everything from increased electric vehicles and mandates around that to how we pay our electric bill. Do you think that will help expedite the entire industry?
Well, there are multiple dimensions that affect time to market. Government policies have been changing, which improve time to market in Europe and in the United States. Economic incentives are in place, where as a result of manufacturing economies of scale, we've been able to greatly drive down the price of solar panels and wind turbines and other forms of technologies used for renewable energy. And then there's market acceptance as well. Early adopters have installed solar panels, but now we're moving into later stages. And as in every industry that I've worked in, as you move into these later stages, the volume of production goes up, the time of deployment improves. So there's significant opportunities for moving to clean energy. We've got a couple of big barriers yet. The biggest one in my mind is the lack of seasonal energy storage. Batteries do a good job for short-term memory, but it would never have helped us during the 6 days of power outage in Texas during the winter storm. We need something that's going to store energy for multiple months of energy usage. And there are several that have been adopted, and Europe is leading in a couple of these. One is green energy in Northeastern Europe with green hydrogen and green ammonia. Germany is leading in pumped hydro capabilities, converting old abandoned coal mines into huge batteries with pumped hydrogen. And Iceland is leading in geothermal energy. And the University of Texas, fortunately, has recently started up a geothermal project. And how can we tap in to the geothermal energy under the ground here? And the United States has hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil wells that could be used, perhaps.
It's very interesting, and unfortunately, I feel like this is going to be a topic that is more at the front of our minds again as we hit the summer peak energy consumptions again. I feel that in Texas, we may have the opportunity to continue to reevaluate, those opportunities perhaps a little bit after the fact as we flirt with more crises this summer.
Unfortunately, the problem we had this winter was warned that we would have that problem when it occurred the last time in 2011. So only we had a decade and we did nothing. So hopefully the next decade we will do something.
Hopefully doing something will involve incorporating more partners into this. As you mentioned, there are technologies out there that have been proven and established. We understand the complications and the streamlining required to adopt them. So there are opportunities that I think may have a new position to be integrated into our system. And hopefully we see some of that change before we get to go through a summer form of our winter storm. Sebastian, and unfortunately we're running a little bit tight on time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts quickly on, you've worked with all of these different specialized hubs around the US. You work with many European partners with an increased focus on clean tech initiatives. Have you seen a trend for more Green Deal initiatives between the two continents?
I'm going to try to make a parallel between health tech and clean tech. In R&I, so research and innovation, I think there's going to be a big push for collaboration, and that's what I addressed earlier. When it comes to bigger device equipment, then there's been a push for more efficient supply chain, which is going to probably have a consequence on trade, because now everybody has been pushing the reshoring topic even more. So that would have a consequence on trade and exports, which means it's time for the companies to be earlier in the other continent and start partnering, collaborating, and thinking of building something instead of depending on old rules of trade. So that's really on the clean tech side. Also, to go back to collaboration, definitely in health tech, it makes sense, and we've seen that. Remember that Moderna, the CEO, is a French guy that went to Boston to raise money, and like it happens a lot. It's when you come from Europe, you think of Boston as a place because it's right there. And you can raise way more money, and that's what he did, and that's been successful. So I think it's a great example. When it comes to clean tech, yeah, we want to collaborate, but US we don't want the US to we want the US to keep its leadership, and Europe has been pushing very hard on that topic and climate change. On our side, Horizon Europe, which is that bunch of money that's spent together, and that's how we finance our program. We're talking about 100 billion euros that's going to be spent for the next about 6 years, and 30% is on clean tech. And that's only what we see, because after that there's a lot of matching funds. So we want the US to collaborate on that and match those funds, so we can come with solutions together, and not just having Europe, taking the lead and create a trade discussion that we don't need. So that's my, again, going back to collaboration, and we are glad the Paris Agreement is back on track, and that with those topics could be put back on track, at least on the research and innovation level to start.
It's very exciting. Hopefully we can touch base in a couple of months and hear how some of those programs have progressed. So as you know, this is our preview for the Texas European Union Summit. We will be having an expanded in-person version, hopefully in September. So at that time, we'll be able to pick up, see how new developments have manifested across the landscape, look at what's been changing in the transatlantic bridges that we work in. And right now, I'd like to wrap up with a couple of concluding thoughts. We have Matt Rabatine with us to share his final considerations at this preview.
Well, hello, everybody. And I just would like to thank all of our presenters, but especially thank you, Elizabeth and Ben and Sebastian and John for your wonderful talks today. So thank you all for being here. I also wanted to the attendees, thank you for your time. It's such a precious commodity. So thank you for spending this morning and early afternoon with us. Oh, and one more thanks, two more thanks I would like to extend to the organizing committee, Mortada, Mohammed, Ben Ramirez, Regina Schneider, Rachel Steimley, and Jonathan Black. Without you, this is the fruits of your labors. So thank you so much for everything that you've done and the time and your passion for the summit. And just as Elizabeth said, my last piece of information is that we will be reconvening, hopefully, in a hybrid, face-to-face, and also virtual, with virtual attendance option as well. Right now, we have tentatively scheduled our fall meeting, in-person and virtual hybrid event for September 21st at UT Austin. Please do know that, just as I guess we've become accustomed to over the past year and few months, that this date may be subject to change dependent on occupancy or health, public health or CDC related guidelines. But I just kindly ask you to check back frequently to the Texas EU Business Summit website. I will drop that link in the chat again, where you'll be able to find further information about the upcoming summit. And once again, thank you so much. Mortada, Ben, if you have any other comments, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been great and wonderful to see everyone. And like you said, keep your eye on the website and to check for that next one. Thank you, Matt, for everything you've done.
You're very welcome.
Okay. I was wondering if we can have a group picture. Can everybody turn on your camera for now? Like have yeah, Sadie, Regina, Jonathan, we're gonna have a group picture. Rachel, Mary, okay, a good deal. I'm sure Jonathan would appreciate that when you put it on his in the newsletter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, having our panelists. This has been an excellent light conversation. I'm happy to continue it on LinkedIn if any of you have any new considerations to add to the conversation. Like I said, this is a big world and a lot of things are happening right now. We're dealing with so many new opportunities. So let's continue the conversation. You can find the World Affairs Council newsletter. You can find us in different groups on LinkedIn. Just do a quick search. And let's keep engaged and keep the conversation going until our larger summit in September.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, and best wishes, and be well and be healthy.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, team.
And this will conclude our virtual Texas EU Summit preview. Have a great day, everyone.